Hey, what's up, everybody? We're about to go live. By the way, if you can't hear us, let us know right away. It's good to know. But I have an awesome guest today. I can't wait to talk more about. And you're watching Coding After 30, Coffee Code and Chat, where we bring you the truth about getting hired as a developer, because there's a lot of stuff online that we just don't know if it's accurate or not. And so this is where I try to keep it honest, and I'm really excited because I have an amazing guest. I'm gonna bring him in just a second, but if this is your first time, this is Coding After 30. I usually stream Friday nights, 9 p.m. US Central Time, and Saturday mornings, 11 a.m. And if you're not subscribed, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But let's kind of get to it. So I'm going to bring Luke in. Hey, what's up, Luke? How you doing today?
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's really good to see you, Paul.
Yeah. Sorry, I had the too much audio stuff on. I heard an echo.
No problem.
I think no. That's all on me. Yeah, I'm doing good, man. It's been a while. The last time you came in, you did a very cool. We did a really awesome stream. What I really liked about the last stream you did, you demonstrating your project and being able to talk about it so well, which was pretty awesome. And then all the other tips you gave, And so, for some people that haven't met you yet, can you give us a brief overview where you started, why you decided to switch careers, and leading up to your first job?
So I was 37, total misfit, loser, fuck up. I had a kid. I was making $14 an hour, and I realized, I really need to get my shit together. I could barely hold down.
Sorry to interrupt you. The way you started that story, I'm like, he's totally talking about me right now. I think that's why we connected, because I had a kid. I made like $13.75 an hour, and my prior life, I made lots of mistakes too. So I love it. Yeah, keep going. Keep going.
Awesome. So I was like the world's most pathetic kind of entrepreneur. I was always starting these crazy businesses. I was exporting cheese to Japan. I had a radio contest business with celebrities bartering radio time. And none of them really made any money. I did make some money in my 20s in construction, and then I completely messed it all up. And then so from 29 to 37 was just a further descent into hell. But I had a really cool wife who was very supportive. But I was not doing well. Once I had a kid, when we were at the hospital, I was thinking, oh my God, these people are not that much older than me, and they're all doctors and surgeons. I'm like, how much is the surgeons making? And I remember this doctor asked me, he's like, hey, how's the crib? You got the nursery all set up and stuff? And all I was thinking about was money and what a loser I was. And I had to take care of this kid, and how much nicer this doctor's house probably is. It was really weird. And I was like, okay, I've got to completely change things and focus on real stuff, real opportunities right in front of me. And I was working as a software tester, which did help. And so what happened was, he was born May 28th, 2020. It was the height of the pandemic. So I was taking care of him. My wife was working a lot, and I was also working. And then at night, I was trying to teach myself how to code. There was these really hard tests at my job to keep working there, even though it didn't pay very much, but was very flexible. Yeah. So I was researching weird learning strategies to pass these really hard tests. I got really obsessed with this thing called Super Memo, and I found an eccentric group of nerds who were into this on the internet. I had a dysfunctional, pathetic parasocial relationship with this group. Through there, I met a C# developer, and he told me, hey, you should, if you want to get into programming, you should learn Vue, because that's a lot easier than C#. And that was terrible advice, really bad advice. So I started learning Vue until October 15th, and then I decided to switch to C#. And I was super disorganized. I made the worst possible decisions in terms of projects, strategy, did everything wrong, but at least settled on C#. That's, I think, when I maybe met you, and I was really into the Coder Foundry YouTube channel.
Yeah, I think that's where we met.
And I think I saw you on there. So did C#, blah, blah, blah. I built the worst projects, so bad. And then I finally got a job through a weird process I'll tell you about. And that started April 11th. Then I got fired August 2nd. They let me stick around for a while in a weird way. They were actually pretty nice about it. And then I took a week off, and then I started my new job, which is amazing. Dream job, Coding After 30 Paradise. The day after Labor Day, September 7th, been there ever since. So
yeah, wow, that's awesome. I love your story. And when I met you, when we talked, even before like doing the first stream, I was just like, wow, there's so like you're younger, but there's so much parallel like in your life and my life, and I really like was able to kind of like really feel the connections because the struggle is real. And what a lot of people, like I was gonna say, like in a weird sense, like we all have something that our weight that we have to carry, mistakes that we made, and I love to talk to people like you because like you made a decision and you work towards it, and now you are where you are, and you just, like I 100% could tell you that, like, because this is how I felt. Like I felt like quitting half the time. Like I didn't have motivation to study sometimes, and like the journey was hard. So like, let me just have you speak a little bit like about like the actual journey of learning and like the reality of like, hey, like maybe having doubts, maybe feeling like, why if I don't succeed, and how, like, what kept you motivated to keep going? Because there's definitely lows.
What's crazy to me too is, so my son almost was not here because I failed computer science in college. Like I always had this pull to programming. Like my uncle gave me one of the first compact, it was supposed to be portable computers. It was this giant suitcase. I think it came out in 1983. I was born in 1984. And it was so magical. And I would like go to the library, get a book on basic, and I was like so excited the first chapter, and then it would get way too hard and I just couldn't do anything. We did HyperCard in school, same thing, couldn't hack it at all. And then I took a computer science because I was in college. This was 2005 to 2006. I was like, okay, I'm gonna get a good job instead of just doing liberal arts bullshit. And I failed the class so bad. Like I was by far the worst student there. People would make jokes, be at a party or something, be like, hey, Luke's a really nice guy, but a terrible computer programmer.
Oh, no.
Was by far the worst programmer there. And this professor took me aside and he's like, look, you haven't made any program at all year. Just make anything in Java. Like make a thing move across the screen, anything, and I'll let you graduate. But you can't get a single Java program to run or compile or anything.
Oh my gosh.
So you're not going to...
I blame Java though.
Yeah, Java, but C# basically the same thing.
I know, I'm just kidding.
I had a date, my first date with my now wife was scheduled. Yeah. She invited me to this concert, and I had to cancel, stand her up completely at the last moment. Because it's like, look, I'm not going to graduate college because of this stupid, horrible computer science class that I cannot pass because I can't do like Hello World in Java. But luckily we patched it up. Otherwise, nothing would happen. I'm sorry, that was completely uninteresting.
No, it is.
You asked me.
No. That's totally the reality of what people experience. Because sometimes people think it's like this, like people on YouTube, not everybody. That's why I love talking to people that just recently got hired. But there's so many people that romanticize the journey. And the reality is there's nothing romantic about this process. There is no like, oh, in 30 days or 3 months is super pushing it. Like you really have to sacrifice a lot.
The advice on YouTube is horrible. It's so bad. So bad. There's like your channel really kept me going because I had some really bad moments. And the inspiration you provide to us older folks on your channel or over 30 is really amazing. The Coder Foundry channel is cool. There's like a couple other people, but the advice is so bad. And then when you meet people who are trying to break in, like what they're thinking is so terrible and such awful advice. So hopefully we can correct some of that, or at least offer a different perspective.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, like for me, like speaking, like I'm not a C# developer. I did it for a little bit, but on YouTube, there's a lot of advice. But like you said, one of the reasons I was drawn to Coder Foundry because they just told you like straight up, this is what you have to do, and they were realistic about it. They didn't push their bootcamp. You didn't even know they are bootcamp because they're just literally about value. And so for me, like that's the people I want to associate with. And that's why I'm so happy to have you like come chat with us, because we need to talk to real people. They're in the trenches. They're going through the process without the BS, because like you had up and downs. Like you had moments where you were feeling low and like, man, this is very depressing, and you just kept going.
I procrastinated on building any project for so long that I was like studying from the books and learning a bunch, but I was like, I have to build a project to get a job. So I said, anyone who asks me to build any app, I will say yes to, which is crazy. So I started building this app for this random college student in, I think, Pakistan. And he was just like, hey, I need an app that I have access to this new API on Oxford Dictionary. And it's really cool for like language research. So let's build an app to research this API. And it was cool because the API was not yet released.
Yep.
That was a terrible idea. That was such a bad project. Do not do that. Do not follow a passion project. Like Coder Foundry is absolutely correct about you should build a bug tracker in C# to get a job. So then I freaked out like after I think December 1st is when I was like, oh my God, I have no portfolio at all. I've made the worst choices building a project. So then I went all in and trying to do a project management kind of portfolio app, which is what I showed on their show. And it was terrible. And what's funny is I met other Coder Foundry graduates after we met, and they were like, dude, your app is terrible. Like that's 1/3 of the app that you would build if you went to the Coder Foundry bootcamp.
Yeah.
I don't think people are going to give you a job with that or whatever, but I was still able to break in. And this is how I did it for people who are curious. What I did is I did not actually really apply to many jobs at all. I broke in through the contracting to big business to enterprise route, and I went through hell doing it, learning all this shit, and then going through such an awful job, suffering, and then coming through at the other end, which I highly recommend still. I still think the contracting world, if you can break in, is the best way to get in. Or something I recommend, like if someone I cared about asked me, how do I go from being a 40-year-old bartender or whatever non-technical, I've never touched a computer before, I barely know what a computer is, to being a professional, like a full-time developer, I would say try to get into contracting. And then there'd be like very specific steps to do that, which I have not really heard anywhere else.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I was just trying to network with people because I knew nothing about this world. I didn't even know contracting existed. So I was actually about to, money I didn't have, send to Coder Foundry to go to their bootcamp. This is taking way too long. And I called them and I talked to, I guess the guy on that podcast, his wife, Bobby's wife runs the program. And I was like, oh, so what happens afterwards? Who do you, I heard you have like a recruiter on staff that gets jobs. And she said, oh, we used to do that, but now we go to this company, Tech Systems. And that's who we work with from all our bootcamp grads. So it's like, I've never even heard of Tech Systems, who is the biggest contracting firm there is, period. And then there's a few other ones. So I just started trying to meet people who knew about Tech Systems. I met one guy who went to Coder Foundry, and he's like, oh yeah, that's a pretty good recruiting firm, but they're only going to care about your test scores. They're not really going to care about your portfolio at all. And I was like, really? That's shocking to me. So I just messaged recruiters. I did a pretty terrible job of it. For example, one crazy thing I did is I messaged Java and C# recruiters, thinking that, okay, Java is basically just C#. I mean, C# is Xerox from Java. Java, came out in 95. And for noobs, we're not talking about JavaScript. We're talking about Java from Sun Microsystems, 1995. Code Once, Run Anywhere, James Gosling, whatever. So, and then C#.NET is Xerox from Java, exact copy. Microsoft's like, we're not going to do this. We're going to make our own thing. It's going to be all ours. Go to hell, Java. So I was like, if you know C#, you know Java, whatever. But that is not true at all. Like, I know a lot of C# recruiters now, they don't even talk to Java people. Like, I'm pretty plugged into the Tech Systems office in Charlotte, even though I'm in Virginia. And they don't like me as much here, I don't think, because I got fired from their best client. But in Charlotte, like, it's a huge building. There's 110 recruiters there, and they're on the phones all day calling programmers. And the Java and C# people, like, that's the absolute enemy. Like, they don't talk at all.
That's crazy.
So that doesn't work.
That's crazy. So, So, like, just backing up to, like, a little bit. So, for instance, instead of trying to send out a bunch of resumes to a bunch of different companies, what you literally did is identify one of the biggest contracting firm. In your case, it was Tech Systems. And there's a couple others. And your approach is you saying that it's not that you can't get a job doing the other route where you apply, go to it, but you feel that contracting has a better entry, I guess, like rate or something. Like, why do you think that?
So for many, many reasons. So I didn't know there was a contracting world at all in programming or what contractors do. Like, I thought when AT&T hired a programmer that, and you got something from AT&T, I'm just throwing that name out there, that their programmers actually built that. But it turns out, actually, the way the world works is full-time employees at big companies basically don't do that much. About 90% of all the work is done by contractors. So full-time employees don't have to work that hard, but then contractors work the way coal miners used to work. But you want to break into programming, you want to get better, you want to level up faster. So you don't mind working hard, you listener. So contracting is great for that. And you come in through weird side door to companies who it would be totally different if they were hiring you as a full-time employee.
Sense. And by the way, just to clear things up, when you're talking about contracting, you're not talking about Upwork, me finding some random dude no. This is like business to business contracting, a firm that basically will get a qualified person like yourself or me or anybody applying, and what they do is that they're gonna contract you to like a big company like AT&T, Microsoft, DNB, whatever it is. This is not minor stuff, and this is why this is genius, is because like I just listening to you, I was like, oh my God, he's absolutely right, is that those companies where I would not be able to, let's say, get a job by sending my resume, but instead if I went the recruiter contracting side where they already have a relationship, that's 100% way easier.
Way easier. I've met so many people now who have broken in through going the contractor route, and it's important to keep in mind there's you can think of it two kind of different things. So there's sort of contract to hire jobs and smaller, like you'll go in with a small squad of people the consulting firm is trying to place, and those might be really short contracts, which is what I was doing, was a 6 months contract, and then because I was terminated, was ended a little bit early, and then they did convert one of the people. But from that, just because I had some experience at all, it was way easier to get the second job, even though I was fired. And from that, so those are like short contract to hire jobs. Where I'm at now is a Fortune 500 company. They use tons of contractors. Then there's also, I guess, contracting proper, where companies will have big projects. For example, like one I'm very familiar with was a project where they're like, here's $20-30 million. We need to build software that every time we get sued goes through all the Microsoft Outlook and Teams and everything all the employees are using, and in a very secure way gets records of that for the lawyers, for deposition or whatever. That is like an internal greenfield kind of project where some ambitious 35-year-old at the company is like, hey, I can get it done, in $30 million in 3 years. Give me a budget. And then they have this big budget and they go, hey, I need a ton of labor to get this done. And that's when they go to the contracting firms. And one's like, so that's not really contract to hire, is that you have a 3-year contract, let's say, and you can leave whenever you want. But they generally pay a lot more. And Microsoft is the most interesting one because they've got like 45,000 full-time employees. They treat them really, really well. But they have contractors that they don't really talk about that they pay even more than the full-time employees.
Wow.
And they use it kind of to fill out their teams. For example, they're very centralized, kind of in Redmond. They've got this beautiful, beautiful campus. But they have sales offices all over the country. They might have a specific product they need customized there near the client. They'll use contractors for that. They'll use contractors to kind of, they're working on some project. They don't really quite have as many people. But what's interesting about what they do is they pay way more. Like that's more high end where they pay big bucks.
I would say I'm interested about that pay difference. Would you say it's because maybe the benefits are different when you work as a contractor? Maybe you not have like full medical and like whatever. So to compensate for that, you get probably like higher hourly rate.
I mean, there are benefits if you go into contracting too, which is why it's so much better than freelancing. Like people, I mean, they're like, I'm going to learn React. I quit my job to learn React via, Udemy videos or YouTube videos. But it's kind of boring. So I'm going to, make some text adventures in Python. And then I don't really want a boss. So I'm going to like freelance for pizza shops locally and like build a menu for them, and I'll have like 20 freelance clients and that'll be great. And I'll be making $100,000. I'm thinking, no, that is a terrible idea. It's really hard to do freelancing because people who aren't programmers,
nobody wants to listen to that.
It's such a common dream. You're so much more likely to get that dream by contracting to Fortune 500, where you have a team of people who are helping you get the jobs, getting just plugged into that world, where you're much more likely to have a full remote job, especially as a contractor. They will give you benefits, not as great as a full-time employee, but there's just so many advantages if you get into that world to get to the dream that a lot of
so much
people
sense.
Switching careers want to do.
Yo, that makes so much sense. 100%. So what we're talking about, those of you who are just jumping in, is a little side step of being able to break into some of these big companies where you typically would not get hired if you sent your resume that way. So what Luke is talking about is going through big contracting firms that work business to business, and they provide employees to huge companies like Microsoft, whatever, like Apple. Here's one thing that I'm surprised, even at my company where I work, there's a level of like you said, there's that core of your team, but then there's still companies go out of their way, hire contracting. And some companies, don't quote me on this, I'm speaking from experience, I'm not gonna say what company in the US, but it's a super huge company. They laid off some of their developers to hire more contractors, which is what? That's insane.
Because, I mean, I think also it's a good thing to think about with economic panic and crazy stuff going on and a lot of companies getting scared. So they have to do hiring freezes. And we can talk more about the subtleties of the difference of going in as a full-time employee versus contractor. But it's very different because the politics of these companies, I mean, to hire employees, it's very expensive and scary and difficult to get rid of employees. Like even a famous tech company like Amazon, where they want to have this horrible, super competitive atmosphere where the programmer sitting next to you is your absolute enemy, and they have these high pressure sprints and everything. So they will, once they decide they don't like you after a month, I mean, it still takes like 4 months to get rid of someone.
Yeah.
And that's a company that's really set up where we want to take the little legal risk of having that high turnover operation. And we have so much prestige that so many people are applying and we can pay so much money.
Yeah.
But in other places, you want to be part of the vendor selection kind of conversation and not the new employee conversation.
Yeah, dude, that's so serious. Like, that's some crazy stuff. That's how they think. You're just like part of a package, and you get it in the company, and you didn't like, yo, that's crazy.
Right, and also to get in, that's why they have to have these crazy leak code tests, and there is some utility to those, but they have to bring in a new full-time employee and be like, okay, here's our standards. We don't really know where these people are going to go. We're a growing company. We need programmers. So here's the standards, and it has to go through the whole HR bullshit of finding people, screening them, going on and on and on. Whereas in contracting, it can happen very quickly, right away, and you're coming completely aside. So especially now with the shift to remote work, a project manager is like, okay, we have to get this thing built. I have X amount of budget. I'm allowed to use that budget pretty much however I see fit. So for example, at big companies, if there's a security upgrade where they're going to use, the things we take for granted that we put in our portfolio projects, a very simple, authorization, just log into my website. That's a huge liability risk for a real big company. So the way they do it is they'll have to use a third-party provider, like that's going to provide the authentication, like Okta or someone like that. They will have to then also hire a consulting firm to be like, hey, we hired a consulting firm to get this set up and make sure it's working. So it's not just all on our own programmers. We'll also have to hire people to audit it, and we'll have to hire contractors to kind of be the liaison to make sure this works. So you're kind of part of that budget, because a lot of companies, the people there might have really good business experience, but they don't want to learn new things. They're not super nerds in terms of learning the latest technology. So you're just like, there's so many teams that are all off on their own little siloed world of like 40 people or smaller or 10, and they need to fill those teams out. And it's really up to this director, vice president, someone like that to get the job done. So they're bringing in like weird rando loser stay-at-home dads to get the work done through the side door. And then a company that does the staffing, they're set up to have high turnover. They're set up, to get people set up with benefits right away and leaving or firing people quickly and dealing with all that hell. So it's a really big deal, but companies don't really talk about it that much. So I'm kind of an evangelist for, if you're coding after 30, as that is a way to get in. Although there are certain dangers, and I can be way more specific. And you will see crazy stuff if you go in through contracting.
Yeah. But I just want to say, like, basically when you're looking for a job, like, you could try every avenue, but I like the fact that you brought light to this because I didn't think of it at the level you did. The fact that there's huge contracting companies whose job is it to place people, and you'll have better chance of getting accepted with that contracting agency that will place you somewhere than you will sending the resume directly to a company. So let me ask before we get on like the cons or whatever, what is the process? How do they qualify that you are a good enough developer to get started?
This is a very, very good question. So basically, when you're getting a
wait, hold on. Sorry to interrupt you, because I know you're gonna have a really good answer. But Dev Mentor Live's been like really hang out in the chat, talking a lot. I just want to shout him out quickly. Mark, Dev Mentor Live, he has an amazing YouTube channel, always does crazy fun stuff. Go check him out, but he's hanging out in the chat. But I didn't want to go another like half hour and not mention him because he's like a brother from another mother. Okay, sorry, Luke, let's do it.
Yeah, that channel is really cool. Yeah, we're saying, so full-time employee at different levels, there are like LeetCode style, like this is how we screen people. Contracting is all basically Jeopardy style questions. So every firm has had horrible experiences with hiring juniors, and kind of bringing it back to the original topic of juniors getting fired, which was kind of unheard of, but now with remote work, it's so much psychologically easier for someone to fire a person who's not actually in the office. Yeah. It's very easy to think, they're probably not doing anything because I can actually see them working, as opposed to if you were in the office all the time and they saw you really working hard, they'd be like, this guy is trying, let's give him some mentorship. Hey, just sit next to him. You know, he's crying into the keyboard. What's going on? Let's help him out. But with remote, especially with contracting, they'd be like, no one's knowing I'm hiring these people. I just go to IT and be like, okay, get this person set up with a laptop that's leased, very cheap, and then I can kind of turn through people if I want, until I find someone that works out or whatever. So the contracting firm will screen people, and then if the company is not crazy, they will do their own screening. Yeah. But they're hiring you for a very specific job, so you don't really usually need to know any kind of LeetCode, data structures, or algorithms type questions. You just have to know the language, stuff that you're practicing for. So how I did it is, which is not the best way. I can explain the best way, I think, in a second. But this guy was like, they're only going to care about your assessment scores. So I was reaching out to recruiters. They were all really nice, but once they found out I had no experience, they ghosted me. Yeah. But then this one woman was really nice to me, and she got back to me and she explained, okay, we're going to set you up with an assessment test and then go from there. So if you go to, IKM assessments, you can Google it. They have a website. If you contact them, you can take their demo test, which is just a history test, just to show you what the test platform is like. That is what TEKsystems uses currently. And TEKsystems is so big, like in Charlotte, for example, Bank of America and Wells Fargo are their biggest clients. And whenever the top brass there are making decisions on on what big IT projects they have to do, like we're going to move, from AWS to Azure or whatever, TEKsystems will be there in the room, and they're like, okay, in our database, we have these many contractors who, here's the top 5% of C# developers. We have X number of them, and, they've been charging this kind of rate, so they can kind of give them some feedback there. So basically, she said I had a week to take it, so I studied like crazy that week. Just grinded so hard. I basically memorized that Mark J. Price book on C#. So it was just C# .NET 5, the first test I took. And then they were kind of like, whatever, this guy's probably a nut. And she didn't really take it seriously. But once I took the test, I got a really, really high score. Then everything changed. The weird thing that happened was her boss or someone, he called me. I think we had met already, or I had a conversation with someone about how delusional it is to break into the industry as like wanting to be a Python developer. Yeah. But this guy called me, and he was like, I thought he was going to cry. He had this huge project he was working on, and he couldn't find Python developers. Wow. And he was like, do you want to be a Python developer? And I was like, I really kind of want to be a C# developer. I've kind of like put a lot of effort into that direction. I don't, want to get sidetracked, because I didn't know that you really should take the first job, which is what Coder Foundry always talks about. So he was like, well, we normally can place people, but they want to do an algorithm test, and I can't find anyone to pass it. Like, you could do an algorithm test, right? I'm like, well, haven't really done any leak code at all. And he's like, well, you could do a simple question like, make a queue out of 2 stacks. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And he's like, like make a queue out of 2 stacks. Like, man, did you make a queue out of 2 stacks? And he kept like trying to like pass me all these weird hints. I'm like, oh, is that the only question they're gonna ask? And he's like, yeah, if you could do that question, you would pass the interview. So now all these recruiters have so much intel on these companies, it's crazy. So that's why I try to meet as many recruiters as possible.
Yeah,
but
so
this sorry, I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say, so basically, talk to a lot of recruiters to get the inside scoop on how companies test and what the assessment process is.
But see, there's really not that many companies. So there's Tech Systems, they're the biggest. There's Apex. There's like one more if you just Google Tech Systems competitors. And then when it gets sub Tech Systems, it gets pretty scary. And Tech Systems, for example, in Charlotte, there's over 20 .NET recruitment offices. And .NET is now, even though Java's bigger than .NET, maybe like .NET's kind of like the Pepsi to Java's Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
I think there's like, it's 5 times bigger or something. But in Charlotte, the .NET office is now quite a bit bigger than the Java office.
Yeah.
But C#.NET is really crushing it there. So by acing that, it was still really hard for this recruiter who she got me my first job and I was her first placement ever. She left college early and knew nothing about computers at all. And they were like, hey, you should be a technical recruiter. And they just say like, okay, you're Microsoft, you're Java, you're whatever. And they just kind of silo these people, not knowing what C# or .NET is or whatever, which is fine. And then she sent me some jobs and I somehow got to see their internal job listing. They have this like huge secret database that once you've worked for them once, you can see with so many jobs that are not posted anywhere else. So I said, hey, you know what? We should also apply for .NET jobs, not just C#. And she's like, oh, is .NET part of C#? Do they go together or something? Oh my gosh,
these recruiters.
And I was like, yeah, man. And from there, we got a little bit more. And she's like, you need to take another test to prove to people. So I did. I studied really hardcore for this .NET framework test. And that one was a little bit weirder because it was like so incredibly
Was
broad.
that on the same website through the same testing place?
Right, exactly. So that's where they're trying to do it. And other firms have tried other ones. Like there's a really weird one called Gilder. Like she got me a screening to be on a junior on a team that does like ATM machines.
Yeah.
I think it was for Bank of America. And they did this weird assessment test where they want to make sure that you're not looking at Stack Overflow or anything. So it has like this AI that like looks at your eyes, and they looked inside my ears to make sure like no one was feeding me the answers.
That's insane.
And it was really crazy. And like I looked up and they were like, you're cheating. That one was pretty weird. But so they place people if they think they can market them, but they basically sort by test scores. And then from there, that's how I got my first job, which was super weird. And I can tell you all about if you want. But I would not do it that way. I would go learn SQL really well for 6 months, get one like certification in SQL, take your time. SQL is a great first thing because if you're going to go in as a backend developer, it's a huge plus to really show that you have real SQL experience. That was a huge problem I had at my first job because they were very SQL, doing a lot in the database. And I thought, hey, I've used Entity Framework, I've used SQLite. That does not count. Like SQLite, little toy things you do is not like real SQL Server in the enterprise with these huge databases. And I think if you've never coded before, starting with SQL is a great kind of way because SQL changes so slowly. You can kind of learn the whole thing, not the whole thing, but you can get to a real mid-level skill level in a reasonable amount of time and not feel like, oh, I got to learn the next JavaScript framework, then the next one and the next one. And like everything with React is changing so fast. So I think that's a really good fundamental one. So I would start reaching out to recruiters. If you wanted to do this and you've never coded before, I would get good at learning SQL. Then I would get like either if you're going to do the C# route, I would do one of the Azure certifications, except they're a little bit too like focused on getting set up with Azure as opposed to just, hardcore, like here's how you write stored procedures and stuff. The Oracle ones are a little bit, I've heard, better at that if you wanted to go the Java route. But I would say SQL 6 months with the goal to be either a C# developer or a Java developer. And that's very important. The stack you pick is super critical because like the React world is not, from my understanding, as good for contracting and really hard to place into big companies. Like if we,
let me quickly bring this up because this is actually a really good point, because you're talking about, number one, working with contracting companies that work with huge companies. So I would say they're enterprise level companies. And if I had to, I'm a React guy, by the way, I'm going to say this right now, but if I had to take a guess, what reigns supreme, C#, Java, and Angular.
Correct. Absolutely.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
If we think of the world as 3 kinds of companies you can work for example, there's like the famous FANG tech companies where they're really dialed in and the programmers are into it. They pay them a lot and they're all writing. I mean, Microsoft uses contractors, but a lot of those companies, the full-time employers really are into coding, learning new technology, pushing out amazing products. And we all know about like the super hard tests you have to pass and the high salaries and all that. So that gets a lot of attention, the kind of FANG, Silicon Valley, towards companies. Then there's the smaller companies that are not going to IPO, or, like my sister-in-law's boyfriend's a React developer. There's like 10 people at his company. I guess the guy used to be more in the startup world, and they do like some kind of wholesale food thing. So it's technically a startup, but it's not like super ambitious kind of startup or like a huge FANG company. And that's all React, although he does have to know SQL and write things in Postgres because he's got to, wear many hats. But then if you think of the other biggest part of the world where it's big companies, Fortune 500 enterprise, any company with 1,000 people or more, that's going to be C# or Java. I mean, our whole civilization really runs off of huge databases being accessed with C# or Java code.
So just to kind of
front end Angular, definitely.
Yeah. So kind of quickly sum up. So if you're going to enterprise level, you're going that contract route, there's a lot of stuff available, but what reigns supreme, Java or C# with ASP.NET, and definitely all the databases use SQL. So you should probably spend a good time. And I like your SQL idea. For some people, it's not like exciting, but not just from you. Like I didn't go this route, but I heard it from many people who literally decided to just focus on SQL and get a job like working with SQL. And once they were hired, they continued to explore like programming languages and to move forward. That's a very interesting idea, which a lot of people don't think about.
Because I think, man, if you do SQL, right, like you get SQL for Dummies, you start going through the book, writing out the recipes in the book. How do I get like all sales managers over 50 and those under 20 and like select from 2 tables at once, blah, blah, blah. You start putting those in Obsidian, making really good notes, start blogging about it, make your own little video course. The last thing the world needs is another video course on SQL.
That's not true.
But that will really help you learn. And then if you have a goal of like, hey, man, I'm going to do one of these really, which in the programming world, certifications are a joke. In the IT world, where people are like network engineers, the Cisco certifications are a really big deal, and they're obsessed with them. But that's enough to just do one, be like, okay, I'm going to try to study, learn, get an Azure cert, just the one on the SQL, never, ever, ever, ever touch any other certification ever again besides that. But that's just getting me started. And then if I go on like brainbench.com and buy one of these really cheesy assessment tests, like the ones that you can buy as an individual, or if you have Pluralsight for work, they've got those, which I've never used, some kind of assessment thing. And then if you do well on that, then you can use that to start networking with recruiters, start going to the tech systems people and be like, hey, they'll be nice to you. They might ghost you, but just follow up until they say no. And say, I want to take the test. I just want to take the test. My goal is to be a C# developer. I'm changing careers. I'm getting into it. Through SQL, I did really well on this assessment test I took at home from BrainBench. I spent $50 and I aced it because I'm a badass now. My SQL blog over here, just let me take the test, and then you can start networking with people. You can meet other more junior SQL people and just tell them my eventual goal is to be a C# developer. Then from there, once you've done that, once you're in their system, you've done a really good SQL performance in one of their assessment things, you might get contracts like they hire database people where I am all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe not super junior. Like database people are usually like programmers who something was wrong with their brains and they became obsessed with the database, and then
Yeah.
they moved over into being DBAs or database consultants or something like that. But that is, I think, a really cool way in terms of just strategic goals.
Yeah.
Try to get good at SQL for 6 months. Then that's a big milestone. Then start networking from there. And then from there, try to become a C# developer or Java developer if you want to go this route.
You know, what I wanted to say, what's crazy, like the way you talked about it, and you took way completely different path than I did, because I do like React and JavaScript. We're like so
That's awesome,
different, like the spectrum of things, but we both had similar beginning. You had a kid, I had a kid. We both like were fuck ups. Like we both like were about to not have any money. Shit was going to happen. But yet you got somewhere, I got somewhere. So the secret that I was going to say is not so much like the advice is like the steps to take so you don't have to waste your time. But I think the secret is something that like a lot of people don't talk about, is the fact when you talk about the things that you're doing, like in your mind, it's almost something clicked or tweaked where you're like, I'm fucking getting this job.
Exactly.
Like that there's nothing that's going to stop me. Maybe it'll take a year, maybe it'll take 2 years, but I'm going to make it happen. And I feel that a lot of people, they get very committed to this 3 months time frame where they think like, if I go to a boot camp or if I do this, I'm going to get a job. That after 3 months they quit. And it's the attitude that you have. This is why I love talking to you, because like I could talk to people and I could be like, shit could go like wrong with their lives. As long as they're not dead, they're going to keep pushing forward until they either die or they get the job or they like get to their goal. And that's the grind. That like literally like one superpower I had was just like keep banging my head against the desk until something made sense and continue doing it until I got hired. That's what that is.
Right, absolutely. I'm super woo-woo now about computers. Like now that I'm a professional junior dev, I think it's really more like when the machine, the god of the computer is like, okay, this guy's not going to quit when you're debugging something. That's when the machine opens up. Yeah. Like, it's very, very weird to me now how that works. Because that always happens, always. Yeah. You're just like, oh, God, nothing is working. I'm the biggest failure in the world. Everyone's going to find out when I'm a fraud, which does happen. And then suddenly it opens up. Just when you're like, I'm never going to get this to work. So dude, that is a really cool thing about programming.
3 years working, I kept feeling I'm going to get fired. Like today's the day. Like I show up at work, I'm like, today's the day.
But you never got fired.
No. I never got fired. But I had like imposter syndrome hardcore. So that is an issue. But the fact is, basically, if people just continue to learn a little bit every day, like everybody should know this. I don't even have to say this, but if you stop learning new things right now, how relevant do you think you'll be in 6 months?
Right.
You know, you can't do that. And that's like by the way, that's one thing I love the tech industry, because I know I'm only like to stay relevant, I just have to keep learning. And so if anybody is not keeping up with their studies, I'm going to get ahead of them. You know what I mean?
I was really insecure starting later in life, I guess, you know, but you can really pass people if you're passionate about studying and you have a way of studying that works for you. It's really amazing. And then people don't update their skills, and a lot of valuable programmers, especially the kinds that don't really switch jobs, especially that you meet as a contractor, they are valuable because they have so much knowledge about the business. It would be a disaster if they left. But it's not like they know so much more about programming than you. They probably are not the type of person who wants to learn a new thing. They just know so much about just their thing. So everything becomes really specialized in sort of a subtle way. And you should absolutely not be intimidated by whenever you're starting, because it's just like a process. In a certain amount of years, you will absolutely pass anyone if you just keep grinding at it. It's not like a thing where like, oh, you started violin lessons at 5, so you got to start when you're really young. Like programming is definitely not like that. If you're going to not die in the next 5 years, then you can absolutely get to total world class. It seems like, at least from people I've met and observed, by just keep grinding and going through the different steps. And then people after 5 years, you're going to be, no one's going to know that you didn't start from in the womb.
Oh, no. Like, people don't even ask me what my first job was anymore. Like, nobody cares.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like they don't
Yeah.
like, what'd you do? Like whatever. But
Yeah.
here's a cool question. Engine Boy says, I think it's very hard to get a job as C# developer rather than a JavaScript guy. And what I would say, to be honest, it depends. Like you need to pick a path and you need to have constraints in your path. Like when you because I've done ASP.NET C# for a little bit. It's the whole ecosystem that's all you focus on. And there's a very particular opinionated way of how you're going to be building stuff. So if you just focus on that, like I think you have just as much of a time to get hired as if I only decided to do JavaScript and only focus on React front-end development. The idea is that you need to have your focus and you need to get really good at that focus that you could get stuff done. And to me, like, let me just say this. If I were to become ASP.NET C# developer, I probably wouldn't even touch React. I would just focus on exactly the way, like, you know how you have like the different templates, like you could do like in the Visual Studio.
Right.
Like I would just focus on building shit with those and getting really, really good at it. And then getting really, really good at SQL databases, because you're constantly working and checking the data and like whatever. And I'll just stick to that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
now, like,
I think actually, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So this, just offer a different opinion. I think we're living now through what I call the Angular apocalypse, because, okay, check this out. I didn't know anything about Angular at all. Like, I barely spell Angular. But I was just put in charge of, like, kind of in charge unofficially of this huge Angular project. This is a Fortune 500 company, and no one is willing to learn Angular, okay? And, like, these clients that depend on this software are, like, really, really big players. And what's happened, both places I've been, is there's all these legacy apps, right, that were written in AngularJS. This is part of why Angular is so big in enterprise, because you go back, you know, bringing it back to the day when AngularJS first came out, it was like such a big deal that I can just use ng model and put these little JavaScript here and there and do two-way binding. Like, wow, this is so much better than Knockout.js. And then there's like a little router you can do, and you can do partials, and you know, it's kind of moving sort of towards, you know, the modern frameworks everyone's obsessed with.
Yeah.
But so they stopped there because C# developers really hate doing front-end stuff.
Yeah.
And there's all these, in the C#.NET ecosystem, there's all these horrible, horrible Microsoft products for making front ends. Like there's like web forms, MVC pages, Razor pages, now Blazor, which is also kind of a scam. But there's so much legacy AngularJS stuff. And then this year, January 2022, AngularJS is no longer supported officially by Google. So there's so much legacy apps where management was like, wait, we can't have anything that's not under support. That's a liability issue, even if it's just like a little bit of JavaScript here on these crazy, ugly old apps that corporations depend on. So the word came down on high, like, hey, you've got to update Angular. So the next thing that programmers did is they said, we're not going to learn Angular. That sucks. Let's go read a blog post about making your own Angular. I talked to a recruiter in Charleston, South Carolina about this, and he has tons of clients who did this. And this has been an issue with so many people I've talked to. So they make like the crappiest version of AngularJS you can imagine, where it's one JavaScript object that like holds all sorts of weird things, like the entire app they're trying to do, and it has maybe like 2 or 3% of the features of AngularJS. And if you think of how old-fashioned AngularJS is now compared to modern Angular or modern React, so it's created this huge catastrophe. So they realize, hey, wait a minute, this is a scam. You can't do this. Definitely now learn actual Angular. And then all the back-end developers at these companies are like, okay, fine, whatever, Angular. They see like an observable, they see RxJS, just the stuff that modern JavaScript developers take for granted. And they're like, whoa, what is this? This is crazy. I'm not going to learn this. This is terrible. So just in the second half of this year, if you talk to the C# recruiters in the contracting world, it's all like, oh, got to have Angular. Like the desperation for Angular with C# is incredibly high. And it's the same thing in the Java world, I know, with Angular. And like, guys, you know, people are like, oh, React's so much better. And it's probably more technically superior. There's more new features coming out. But React is too many meetings. Like no enterprise wants to have so many meetings about what router are we going to use? Oh, there's this new thing and this other new thing. Angular, like .NET, is this beautiful closed ecosystem where you don't have to have that many meetings. Like we had to use Angular material is like basically just part of Angular now. We had to have so many meetings about using Angular material, you know, and that's the maximum amount of meetings that people want to do. So just because there's so many more people downloading React packages and becoming React developers, I think until the heat death of the universe, like Angular in enterprise is going to rule the day. And the demand is crazy. So after I learned SQL, I would learn Angular and C#.NET at the same time, start building a bug tracker kind of thing by with Angular and C#. And I can talk about my crazy weird way of learning if you like. But that's what I would do strategically. SQL, like enough to get a milestone of like I got one stupid SQL and like I can ace an assessment test, and I'm using that to network with people. And then while I'm doing that, I'm learning Angular with C#.NET.
With C#.
There's this book by this guy Valerio De Sanctis, and he's this amazing hair, and he writes a new .NET Angular book every single year, and it does not go deep enough in either one. But you could just do the projects on that. There's one. Like at Tech Systems, we have unlimited free Udemy courses, which is cool. Nice. And there's a pretty good .NET Angular course by Neil something.
Oh, yeah, so it's good. Yeah.
Do those kinds of projects, make your own Angular course and your own blog, and then you're good, man.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say before someone freaks out, because someone's gonna freak out. I was gonna say, Joseph TV, I got my first job at 39 as a developer. He's like, how about coding after 40? That's basically awesome. What this channel should be called, but I refuse. I'm not gonna call that shit. Go fuck yourselves, everybody who thinks I should change the name. But besides that, what I'm saying is that before someone freaks out, like, please understand, you could get a job if you do ASP, C#, SQL, and Angular, and you just focus on that. You have your direction. You don't go out of that lane until you get hired. You could also do it with Python and Django. Just only focus on one thing, you get hired. You could do it with React front-end development. Only focus on that, you get hired. But you have to commit to a tech stack and go all in. Like, I know, like, you went all in. Like, you became very committed, and you decided. And I know we had chats with, and like, I'll be like, hey, maybe you should try React, and like, no, I don't think so. Like, yeah, I like that. I like that because you're like, I am focused on the thing that I need, and this is what I'm gonna do, and this is why you got a job. This is why I have a job. The biggest mistake a lot of people make, they try to do too much crazy like stuff all at once, and like, do not do it. Pick, like, do your research, like you were saying, like, if you want to get like more enterprise positions via the contract route, the best stuff for you is SQL, ASP.NET, C#, and Angular. 1000%. I even agree with it, and I'm like a React developer. And so know where you want to be, know your path, like the things that you have to learn, and only learn those things until you get your first job. Like, I didn't start, like, I went the not full stack, I went the front end route, and I didn't get into like back end development until I got hired at my first job. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so like that's okay. Just have your path and do your thing.
I think though, if like you are like people, React is kind of competitive. I think from people I've talked to, like, you might have to do, you know, okay, I'm a React developer, I'm only going to do front end. You can imagine how much stuff has to happen before we hire a junior front end developer. I mean, so much stuff is happening below the iceberg. And if you took that skill where you're like, okay, I'm ready to apply as a React developer, I'm going on Twitch and I'm like building my apps and I'm showing off to people. Like, you're pretty good. You could learn anything if you've gotten that good at learning one thing. Right. But if you took that 100%. Same skill and you went from being a good junior React developer and were a terrible SQL Server, terrible .NET, and terrible Angular developer, just spread that skill over and just be bad at everything. So I think you're more likely to break in.
Yeah, the thing that I was gonna say, by the way, the skills you described, and I like how you're like saying being like equally not as good in all of them, but good enough that you're gonna.
But it's not unlimited stuff.
You're gonna fulfill a role, and I think like I know you keep referring to it junior, but for me, like, full stack, which ASP.NET C# is full stack development. You can't do it like front end only. Like, that's not how the whole thing works. You like have to basically be a full stack developer. And to me, like, by the time you're done learning SQL, you know, C# and ASP.NET and Angular, you're not a junior. You might be a novice intermediate, but you're no longer junior. And I think, like, if you go to that argument, people are not hiring junior developers. And if you have that full stack, and again, when I say full stack, like your path you're describing, like C Sharp, Angular, SQL makes more sense. I could tell you why in a second.
Okay.
But that it's like you're now looked at as, you might consider yourself junior, but the things you're doing are kind of slightly above that level. And that's an in-demand thing if someone could be like passable in those domains.
Right.
Where if you wanted to be a full stack developer with React and Node.js, they're so different in terms of how like you deploy stuff, things you have to worry, you know, how do you handle caching on the back end? Like, what do you even do? Like that path is going to be way longer. But that's why I love ASP.NET and C Sharp, even though I don't do it anymore, is that it's a very tightly packaged skill set that I believe you would, like, if you had to say who will become a more qualified, faster full stack developer, if you say C Sharp, with everything you're describing, or JavaScript and Node, and then like a React front end because you're going full stack, the C Sharp people will get there first. And like,
I think that
the way it's packaged, it's packaged.
Right. It's interesting because, like, you know, I remember those, like, this is a Mac, this is a PC ads, you know, what was it, in the 90s or something? Yeah. And the deal with, like, the PCs are ugly, kind of a do-it-yourself vibe, but, you know, you can run Windows on anything. And then with Apple, you get the beautiful premium bespoke service where everything is like very closed and fit together. And in the enterprise space, that's what Microsoft is like. Like Java is like a hot mess, and there's Groovy and Kotlin, and like, what language are we going to use? Like all these meetings, like it's all based on the Oracle database. We use Oracle databases, so we got to go with Java, and it's huge, bigger. But people go with the Microsoft stack because everything's like very closed ecosystem, and there's benefits for that and premium. So that is a good point. But I think the thing to keep in mind is for junior developers, they have like a backlog of 8,000 bugs, or of like just this huge backlog of items they need to get to. And they're like, well, if we have a full stack guy, it's not so much that he's good at anything. It's just that we can put him anywhere. We don't really know where this person can go or what they're going to work on. But if they're like pretty terrible, or they can only do some SQL, like here's hundreds of SQL issues to work on. Here's hundreds of like little JavaScript
point. That's such a great point. Like, so let me tell you about my, like, I don't do C Sharp. Would I ever go back to C Sharp? No, like, just because I just found my love, you know, you could have like, we're both okay talking to each other, by the way, people watching, like, there's many paths of getting to your goal. But what I would say, when I got my first job as a React developer, the guy told me the only way you're going to keep your job here if you start learning like C Sharp right away. So I literally, and I started learning C Sharp right away. And here's the cool thing. Because I knew JavaScript fairly well, like C Sharp wasn't that big of a stretch of the basics. You just had to like get comfortable that shit is typed, which is fine. But I found out that very quickly I couldn't write shit from scratch, but I could troubleshoot things and fix like small little issues. And then that's what I realized. They want someone who could like overall has this basic understanding, a little bit of JavaScript, a little bit of like C Sharp, a little bit of SQL understanding, where like they're able to assign all these tasks to you, where like one of the senior or like mid developers, it'll be waste of time for them to do. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And for me, I was like, wow, that totally makes sense. And they need people like that, you know?
Yeah, and there's probably, especially first jobs, someone very non-technical who has the power. Like the class antagonism between the programmers and non-technical managers can be really intense. And that's what now in an interview, the first thing I'm trying to find is like, how horrific is the situation here? Especially if you go in contracting, you see crazy things. So the person who has the power to hire you might really have a very weak understanding of what they need you to do, even if you're being hired for a very specific project in contracting. Like if you're going in through the front door, the HR might have a specific requirements of like, okay, we need someone who is at this coding standard, and you might meet with technical people and they'll grill you, but they don't really have a clear idea of like what job you're going to do necessarily. It's just like, we're in hiring mode, we're freaking out, we're not in hiring mode. So it's just very good to be technical. Like I was terrible. My first job got a really intense grilling on C Sharp, and I did really good on just C Sharp, but the SQL stuff I completely bombed. I couldn't remember what a table variable was. I knew like select star from and inner join, outer join. That was it. Because I was like, I use entity framework, SQL. Like, what is? I don't need to know this. And that was a terrible. And I completely bombed the JavaScript thing. And they were all about, we need C# developers. We need C# developers. And the job was like 5% C#. I mean, a lot of C# developers are just writing the same repository pattern over and over again. Like if you go to a really serious place, like Infosys hires a lot of junior .NET developers, and they're in medical billing, and they write these really big, complicated controllers that process tons of transactions.
Yeah.
And there you're going to get a code review, and people are going to be like, okay, what's the best way to make this controller? But most places, it's like we've been writing the exact same repository program, makes a Dapper call, here's the endpoint, boom, goes to a really simple stored procedure, and they've been just doing that for like 20 or 30 years. So most places, like they hire you for C#, but really they need tons of database work, or they need tons of JavaScript stuff.
Yeah. I know, like a quick question, because we keep talking about SQL database, and a lot of people like talk about Mongo. Tell me your opinion about Mongo and SQL. Then I'll do my hot take, and Mark could do his hot take in the comments in terms of getting hired.
I think it's a disaster. I think you should stay away from non-relational databases. I think what's happening is that relational databases are taking some ideas from non-relational. Like enterprise is always going to be relational. If you're doing what I described, I think you should absolutely skip MongoDB. Like if you're going to do C# and you're looking at Azure, getting some kind of Azure certification, skip Cosmos DB, just completely ignore it. Stick with SQL. If we're going to go React, be like, I hate this guy Luke. He looks really weird. I don't want to go this path.
Postgres.
Yeah, you would do Postgres. Just stay relational with React, and then get a React job by sending out 600 resumes and work for a small company and suffer. But I would do relational databases.
I'm on my 4th job. Ask me how many of those jobs use Mongo.
How many?
0.
I knew it. 0.
Fuck. Yeah. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong. Yeah, nothing wrong learning it. And I know the reason why a lot of people use Mongo for lessons, because with Mongo Atlas, it's so easy to set up like a thing on the cloud that you could connect your API to. Right. Like you could use Mongoose to make calls. So from teaching standpoint, it totally makes sense, because like there's a lot of less issues to set it up if you were going to teach SQL and or even Postgres. But everybody I talked to who's a developer working not on their personal project, they're all using SQL or relationship databases. I think that's the one you have to start with first. And there might be some use cases where it makes sense having non-relation, but those are far and in between, and they're for very specific use cases.
I mean, I get it too.
Mark, you definitely need to do more SQL content. Hold on, because he does a lot of stuff with Mongo. But I'd love to see more.
I remember it's fun because when you're new, it feels like, oh, I'm still working with JavaScript by working with this non-relational database. But I don't think it's a good idea. And it's weird where I work now, the culture is because the company was started by 2 database nerds, and then the company was bought by a big company, and that company was bought by a Fortune 500 company. But they still kind of have some of that startup culture, and they were really big on everyone's got to learn SQL. So the director actually is a really pretty good SQL developer, and all the QA people are pretty good SQL developers. So it makes such a huge difference that someone would be like, hey, I was talking to a customer and we need this feature, and here's my idea for it. And 80% of the stored procedure, getting the data is written, to you. That was the only time when I was like, oh, wow, maybe all that hype of everyone should learn to code is actually true, because it makes a big difference if everyone in the company kind of knows SQL and can talk about the data of the company.
Yeah, let me ask you a quick question. So you started from not knowing anything about development. You got your first job.
Right.
You don't have to say exact number, but
I'll tell you exact.
You could do roundabout. That's fine. But
okay. So
let's talk about your first job. Yeah, go ahead.
So the first job was $30 an hour, but I was only making $14 an hour before that. So that was probably now a junior is worth around $80K.
Yep.
With all the crazy inflation stuff going on, it's 70, 80. I mean, no one wants to hire a junior because they want a principal at Amazon or something, but they have no money. So they hire juniors, and then they're disappointed. But so I think when you're starting, and then each contract you do, your rate should go up like about $9 an hour. And then for once you have a job, getting another job is so much easier. For
Yeah.
example, when I got fired from this job, and I was completely devastated at the time for like about 2 days, but it changed my life in such a profound way because I like got off the floor finally after 2 days. I'm like, okay, I redid my resume with the stuff I had been working on at this job. Then the next thing I did was because I had so many coding notes from trying to make code work at this job.
Yep.
From Obsidian, I took all these recipes and coding notes and I made a really terrible blog on Hugo. Just taught myself like a little bit of Hugo. Had to put it. It's on lukeavon.com. It's so bad, but I put that up in like 2 days. And then having that blog made such a huge difference. The other thing I did, I completely forgot to tell you this, is that my sister-in-law's boyfriend, who's a React developer, he got into React development because it was his last year of college. He went to RPI, like a really good engineering school, doing electrical engineering. And there's this computer science professor, and he's like, they're telling me I have to teach a class on something called React. I do not know what that is or want to learn what that is. So why don't you be my TA? You can learn this thing. I think it has something to do with computers, and teach the class. So he taught himself React, and then he was making videos for the students, right, of just him coding and teaching, really basic tutorial videos. He put some of those up on YouTube, and then someone referred him to the job, and he got it through this coding, pretty silly coding videos. So he told me that. I was like, oh, that's a really interesting idea. So I, in a panic, made some like one really terrible video. It's like an hour of me doing very basic stuff in Entity Framework. And then when I got my first job, he said, you don't have any experience, but you got really good scores. And we saw this video that you made because my recruiter sent it. And like he said, the reason I was impressed by that is because like we could actually see your face coding, as opposed to most coding videos where they're like copy and pasting and they're going so fast. You don't see the guy's face.
So huge.
So if you just do a really low tech video and having that in the blog, and after I got fired, when I told my recruiter, I'm like, I got fired, blah blah blah. I was like, what's gonna happen? Is this company gonna hate me? Because I remember how hard it was to break in. She was on it. It was amazing. She'd be like calling me at midnight, be like, I have all these jobs. And then 7 a.m., she's like, I'm driving to the office. Here are these other jobs. And I got 3 offers within 2 days after being fired, as soon as I said go. And some of them were good. Like one was for like $100,000.
Wow. That's insane. Insane. It's
they're
amazing.
all around like $80,000. And people are so nice. Like once you have some experience, when I got my first job, the grilling was so intense. And then getting the second job, even though I had just been fired, they were like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to ask you. Like, we use this thing called Visual Studio. Have you ever heard of it? Is that okay with you?
Wow.
Is it okay with you if, we use Visual Studio? We'll send you a lot of monitors. We'll fly you out to our headquarters and put you up in a fancy hotel. It was crazy. So it changes a lot.
I was going to say, everybody,
2.5 months of working.
Yeah, everybody persevere, work through the first job, even your second job, because you will, like, to me, like, so here's the thing, like, my sister, I love her to death. She went through like all these different degrees, all this stuff. And she saw my journey of learning to code, where I struggled, had the worst first job experience, still struggled. Then things got easier, getting my second job, my third job, like my fourth job, like now I work at Strappy. And she was like really happy for me, but she was saddened because she was like, I went to all these universities, I have all these degrees, and all that Paul do is just study every night really hard. I don't want to underplay it. He studied really hard. This tech thing, he's a like dropout, never got any degrees, and here he is making more money than I am. Like, I'm happy for him, but she's like, it's a little bit not like. But I was gonna say, it's like, listen, you better be prepared to do the work, though. Like, you better study. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I think it's a problem too with the video courses sometimes, because the really heartbreaking thing I've seen with junior devs, and I'm glad my first job was absolute hell, but that I stuck through it enough to not get fired instantly. Then I had enough on my resume to get a much better job. But what is the most horrifying thing I've seen is like people, they really want to change careers and be a dev, and they're like, oh, I'm stuck in tutorial hell. I'm just coding along with videos. I'm not building anything. They don't realize that they've coded along with a video. It was kind of fun, and then they've forgotten everything 5 minutes later. and they can't build anything. So they're like, okay, you know what? I need to take the plunge and borrow a bunch of money and go to a boot camp.
No.
Or sign some kind of
You're
like
doing the
crazy
same thing,
income
just
sharing
paying more
agreement.
money.
Exactly. I would only go to boot camp if I was already a coding badass and just like wanted to work on a portfolio and network with people or whatever.
Networking, 100% and recruiters.
Yeah. But then they get fired from their first job and they own all this money because they think they left tutorial hell. They never left. They're still there. They spent so much money. They're still in tutorial hell.
Tutorial hell. It's hard work. Coding is hard. It takes, and we got a dislike. I love it.
But at a real company, it's like you're paid to. It's a research job, you know.
And
they're
it's
like,
back
we
to
have
like,
no
I
idea
love
why
it.
this isn't
you guys
working.
The best and girls. What I was gonna say is that the best thing I started to do is to live code on my YouTube channel, where I still fail miserably, but I felt that that's where I learned the most. And I did this experiment with you. We had Engine Boy on to do his portfolio on my channel, and this is what I do. Anybody who built their thing from scratch, I could. Like you spin the globe and you put your finger anywhere on the globe. I could do the same thing with you too in the code. And I did that when you were on. I'm like, oh, what does this do?
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, oh, this is what it does. Difference. And then you're like, now knowing what I did, this could be done a better way. Not only were you able to talk about your code, you were able to talk about how you would have done it better next time and why you shouldn't have built that project in the first place. Like whatever.
Oh, yeah. Definitely don't use Blazor. Blazor is terrible.
I was so bad. It's like, yeah, you should try Blazor.
Don't use Entity Framework either. Yeah. Blazor is such a bad. That's the one thing I disagree with, or one of the things with that wonderful Coder Foundry YouTube.
It's
because those are like that really sounds like a .NET consultant when they're saying do Blazor. So like the deal with Blazor is
it's not there yet.
This is exactly what I needed in my life, was to load the entire .NET framework or just the runtime in my web browser and like sit there and wait as it downloads all these megabytes to render the app in WebAssembly. But that exists because C# developers do not want to learn the front end. Like they will do anything.
Yeah, anything
but JavaScript.
Like use of, yeah, exactly. My favorite part was like, okay, Paul, I'm going to show you my app, but we have to wait like 15, 20 minutes.
Exactly. And then when you're debugging it, you're like, oh, we got to get the browser debugger to like show C#, you know, do all this browsing stuff. It's crazy. But when you go from like MVC pages or Razor pages or God forbid web forms, you're like, this is so space age. So I can see why someone really in the C# world, and I do get hit up for Blazor jobs all the time. Yeah. But the deal is like they're crappy projects, internal app projects that people in the company need to use, and you're like, okay, there's no way we can get these guys to learn a modern JavaScript framework, so let's just do it in Blazor. There, it makes sense.
Right. That's
there is definitely
a
market for it, but do not try to break in doing
like
that because I'm doing
C# developers that hate JavaScript to a point they'd rather jump off of like a building or something. Right. Then using Blazor makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Exactly. And the other huge mistake is entity framework, because database nerds hate object relational mappers. Like people want to see that you can actually go in and write SQL. And if you really want to get deep in entity framework, like it's actually pretty complicated. Yeah. And there's all sorts of consultants for it and books, and really big companies. Like if you're a C# developer at Microsoft, you're only going to ever see C# from most teams, right? And it's a lot of some really big companies. But at the enterprise space, when it's like a lower status company and you're going in and they need someone to do like all sorts of different things, they're really going to hate that you're dependent on entity framework. So after you learn SQL, you should try to use your app to do ADO.NET or Dapper. Just do a little bit of both and show that, and that's going to make a huge difference. People are way more impressed than that than Entity Framework. Let's
come back to this like tutorial hell thing. So the best thing I've done, like I said, is start building stuff from scratch and struggling, and that's where I saw the learning. I feel that doing tutorials, and you should do maybe like 2 or 3, maybe 5 at most. That's already pushing it. If I were to do it again, and I think like tutorials teach you like to start to try to build things on your own, still failing, but tutorials, you'll never get hired by doing tutorials. You'll never get a job by completely.
Well, the scariest thing is, what do you do when like you're at the job and no one knows why something's not working? There's no video.
The process,
and the video ones are like, they don't go that deep. Like on Angular, like it's cool, but
it's all
those kinds of projects you build,
intro stuff.
Yeah, you got to go really deep into the docs and figure like what the hell is going wrong, and no one's going to know why anything's going wrong, and they're hiring you to figure that out, even though you're a junior. and they're hiring a junior because they can't afford a senior. Therefore, they cannot afford to like really babysit you. So I think it's a problem. It's the coding along with video thing. I think is a problem.
Cody's saying hello. Another awesome.
Cool, man. You've got such a great community.
Yeah, Cody has a great YouTube channel. And by the way, talking about like why I do the YouTube channel, I friended Cody over YouTube. And he actually one day he was like, hey, my company is looking for some developers. And he hooked me up to get like the first interview on the call. Like, and so like that networking piece is like super important. It was for an Angular job. And I decided not to pursue Angular. Luke, sorry.
Yeah, I'm in a panic learning Angular because literally no one will learn Angular.
Yeah.
And they've set up this Angular thing. And I'm like, I'll do it. I'll do the Angular stuff. And I'm like, guys, did you know there's this thing called like ng-serve? You can type it. And then the website pops up. Everyone's like, wow, you know, because the level of interest in JavaScript is very, very low. So Angular is cool, man.
Yeah. No, but like I said, pick your path, stick to it until you get hired. Don't try to do too many things. I think we all both try to learn to code.
But you should pick .NET though.
All right, Luke. I'm gonna agree
but
with you today.
Something you should
Everybody
think about
pick
too.
.NET except if you already been studying like React for a year and you're so close, like listen, don't be wishy-washy switching from one to the other. So I wasted like 3 years of learning to code because I went and I wanted to try every freaking language. I did PHP, C++, like I tried Ruby, and like by the time I knew Ruby, like it wasn't popular anymore. It's until I decided to just stick with JavaScript. And I was considering like C Sharp, but I really like front end stuff and React and and
I think something to keep in mind though too is like something that really bothers me is when people are like, you should look at your local area and figure out what people are hiring. And I'm like, guys, like the whole world, it's either if you're going for big companies, it's Java or C Sharp. You know, if you're going to smaller stuff, like a startup is always going to gravitate now towards React because it's flexible and you can move things. So it's more about like, what do you want to do? Which world you want to try to get into? And I'm obviously think the contracting to big companies is the world to get into, but you just got to think of what do I want to get into? And then when you're thinking of Java versus C#.NET, it's basically, so the deal is like Chicago, New York, the really big cities. Java is definitely way bigger. And something to keep in mind is in college, everyone has to do Java pretty much. And they don't usually do C#. So people apply to Java jobs because they're like, oh, I was forced to do this in college. Like that Java class I failed in 2006. So I'm going to just apply and be a Java developer. And now I got a job and I've got a Java job. Whereas .NET, a lot of companies, a lot of industries have to use .NET or gravitate towards it. But it's more of like, I switched to this kind of thing. So I think the competition is a little bit different view.
But like with that all being said, please don't take this as that's the only way to do it. My way is the only way to do it. The fact that there's plenty of jobs if you're good at your craft. So the idea is whatever you decide on, what path you decide,
but what about
stick to it.
Breaking in as a Python developer? Would you tell someone to do that?
I personally wouldn't because I don't know enough about Python. And then I feel like the type of jobs that you have, like I don't know, like
my sister-in-law is a Python lead, but like that was being really hardcore into data science and like going to really good
let me just
schools.
say this. I have a friend who got a Python job, but he has a PhD in math.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
So I mean, Python rules data science and stuff.
Yes.
But people are like, oh, you should learn to program through Python. And then you get into Python.
No, like I would say start with like either like
just like we're gonna run our bank on Python.
Start with JavaScript, and or if you want, like if you're gonna learn your first language, like I always would say JavaScript, because even if you decide to go C#, you still need to know some JavaScript. And JavaScript, it's a C-based language, and it's not like you're making a big jump from JavaScript to C#. If you know JavaScript well, you could look at C# and be able to like know 70% of the stuff you see.
What about you think about learning C# and TypeScript at the same time? Because they're designed by the same guy, and then you're like, hey, this is like a baby version of C#.
Yeah, you still need to know JavaScript. But yeah, especially, it's like 100%. Like for me, like TypeScript, like I like JavaScript and I don't do TypeScript yet. And people are like, why don't you do TypeScript? Like, I'm like, because I like the wild, wild west of JavaScript. And they're like, well, why if you want it to be things typed, then like go through the, I'm like, I would use C#. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you want to tell you? Like, but with that being said, anybody going like JavaScript route, you all have to learn TypeScript. You can't not know it at this point. In 2022, learn JavaScript.
It's so horrible, like a huge JavaScript project without types, and finding out where things are broken.
Coming from a C#.
JavaScript is a crazy, crazy language, man.
Yeah.
I'm quite terrible at it.
Yeah, that's why you do C#, you know?
So wait, what's going on let's talk about the Agile scam. That's something else I wanted to complain about.
Yeah, let's do it.
What is going on with that? Do they do Scrum at Strappy, or the places you've worked? I am obsessed with this because the Scrum thing at my first job was so horrific. So this is what I look for now.
First company I worked for, it was like literally your boss yelling at you for the first 5 minutes of your day and telling you didn't do your goddamn job from the day yesterday. So that was like the first job I had, which was pleasant. He literally yelled at me, like yelling, like spit coming out of his mouth. And I was like, man, I really need this job so I could get a better one soon. My second job,
that's really bad.
It was like everybody knew each other so well. And like the CEO would like do the stand-ups with you. And it was literally like not like very structured, but we basically did like what did you do yesterday? Did you have any blockers? What are you going to do today? Like we just covered that really quickly in the 5 minutes. And then in my current company,
but it was an everyday stand-up.
Yeah, every day. And then in my current company now, we do everything async, like via Notion. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, and then we check in with each other. And then I actually created some more meetings. So we don't do like them synchronously. We basically do async and Notion. Like this is where we at. This is what I'm doing. And then we'll have like a meeting, which is more of like a strategy meeting of like, this is what we're doing for this quarter. This is what like initiatives are assigned to you, and just basically track your initiatives and let us know how you're doing. But my job, here's the thing I would say, where I work, like you are 1000% self-directed. So if you're looking for someone to tell you what to do, like my company where I work for, you're not you're going to be in trouble, which like for me, like I'm just like, I've been like never made money like as a, like, I mean, when I taught martial arts, you could say that was an entrepreneurial thing. I made like good money, like because I had my own school, but like I always had this entrepreneurial mindset where I'm like, okay, figuring out what I should be doing. You know what I mean? And so for me, like my company now, but I know for some people, they like instead people tell them what to do. And then they're fine in that environment. So
it's so horrible, that deadline pressure thing. I was not prepared for that. Like I didn't know that Scrum was a total scam, and that I thought like when they said Agile, they actually meant being Agile. Like we're going to see how much the developers can get done in 2 weeks and adjust things and be flexible, or we should talk about coding in the stand-up, which is not true. There was this guy from Microsoft who gave me really good advice, and he said like just sound really happy and use the word algorithm as much as possible when talking to a non-technical manager, and they'll think you're brilliant. And it's absolutely true.
That's so
like if you're
insane.
like the algorithm in the CSS styles needs to be refactored for a better algorithm.
They'll be like, he's a genius.
Wow.
He's a genius. Somebody says, Paul, you look tired, bro. I look like this all the time because I'm trying to work on this personal project when I'm not working. And I'm building this thing. On? I want to build a community. I keep saying this every year, but I'm making progress. I'm building a community for aspiring devs to be able to find friends to pair code together and then help each other out on projects. So when I have more stuff done, I'll let you know. Like right now, you could all like literally, I finished the authentication flow where you could register, you could sign in, and then you could add like a basic project. So what I'm trying to do is just get like a basic scaffolding, and then I'll go and refactor and fix stuff. But right now it's like
super cool.
Yeah, but and I'm using Tailwind, so it looks pretty, I guess, whatever.
That's cool. But, have you ever worked somewhere that does SAFe? Has anyone in the chat heard of SAFe?
What is
SAFE? That is the worst hell imaginable. It's crazy. That's super crazy Scrum, where they like plan out the whole quarter, the whole year of like what you're gonna accomplish every 2 weeks, and like there's like 10-hour meetings at the beginning of the quarter of like what we're gonna do exactly every 2 weeks. And these managers like love Jira and playing like Jira Tetris with just like moving things around. It's really, really wild. That is the first thing I ask now. I'm like, hey, have you ever heard of safe? Do you do safe? And then run away if someone says yes.
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it's
Wow,
crazy.
that's insane.
But these are the things that you don't worry about. Like I never in a million years, like we do Scrum at my current place, but it's super nice and chill and not a big deal at all. And if that was my first experience, I would never think twice about it. But now I'm like obsessed with terrible project management.
Yeah, I mean, it's like
pretty miserable out there.
I think it's basically for managers to take responsibility off themselves and put it on somebody else. So whenever something goes wrong, they're like, it's you. And so the issue I have with that Scrum process is this is what, by the way, anybody that's getting a job, you should have a notebook where you keep track of everything you accomplish. So you could always like be able to be like, oh, I did this. This is what I said. Like, because sometimes people will be like throwing you under the bus. Sometimes I'm not saying it's everywhere, but it does happen.
But you know what I did? You know this YouTube channel called Simple Programmer that was around back in the day? I don't know if it's still
that guy's
around.
Nuts. Yeah.
I really don't know anything about it now.
I mean, he's fine, but like he's nutty.
Okay, so anyway, I saw this old video from them, and they were like, you should write down the 5 things you did every day and send it to your tech lead and their boss, and then like your goals for the next week. And I was really concerned of showing that I was like a go-getter at my first job. So I did that, and I think it hugely backfired. It was never once mentioned to me ever.
Yeah.
But my tech lead hated me and was like really wanted to blame me for things. And I think that was a big part of it. I have no proof.
What I was going to say like,
that turned out to probably not
don't
be good advice.
do it weekly. Don't try to be like, I'm better than this guy, but definitely write what you were credited with. So when it's time for you to advocate for yourself why you should get a raise, you should be able to easily talk about what you accomplished in the company, basically.
Yeah, that is a good point. That is definitely a good point. That is a good point, man. So, cool.
So we talked about that. Anything else that you feel like people must know? You're doing great, by the way. Yeah, you got your job.
Oh, thank you.
How's that going? Yeah, like fantastic, man.
It's amazing. People are so nice. And it's incredible. You know what's crazy is when you start meeting people and you realize like the different programming hell realms and the different heavenly realms and like how different it is. Like when you start making friends who like work at Microsoft, you're like, your life is so profoundly better in so many ways. It's incredible. Okay, my exterminator, because we had some bugs here, and
hold on. Hold on a second. Web Dev Junkie also has a very valid thing, and this is probably definitely a really good strategy too. He says, nah, just get an offer letter somewhere else for a higher salary and then ask for a raise. By the way, that's probably like,
that is
good. That one is a really, really good one. I can't even argue with that. That's like phenomenal one and way easier to do than the method I mentioned.
Branch, man.
But you know, that's 100% fantastic.
Yeah. But okay, this guy's son, this is horrifying. He was 35. He had 3 kids. He was over for dinner and he had a cup of coffee and then he died of a brain aneurysm.
Oh, shit.
It's horrible. He was a remote programmer from Microsoft.
That's terrible.
A Microsoft executive flew to their house, the grandparents. He had 3 kids, 35, and they said, hey, you don't have to worry about their education at all. Microsoft's going to pay for everything. Like all their college, everything totally taken care of. Don't tell anyone. We're doing this for you. And then the dude flew off. Isn't that amazing? That's the difference between working for a really good company and the kind of jobs we get or I get.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the company I'm working at now, like they're so people oriented, so awesome.
That's awesome.
Like I feel like I'm like, how did I find this company? Like whatever.
That's
like,
really
this is
cool,
like amazing.
Man. It sounds like a really awesome company. I demoed it to my company and they thought it was really cool.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Try to get some props. I hope your company, knows how lucky they are to have you, man.
So, you know, they do. I'm just going to say it straight up with my arrogance. You know, let me get a little bit shorter so it doesn't come off as I'm really,
they're in
really
Paris
arrogant.
And you're in Austin? Is that
yeah. I'm in Austin, Texas. They're in Paris.
Gotta get there.
You know, which I wanted to move to Paris to work there. And they're like, no. Okay. We hired you because you live in the States. Because part of the stuff that I have to do, I have to travel and talk about stuff. And so
that's cool.
Yeah. So it's pretty awesome.
You must meet a lot of developers, right?
What's up?
You must meet so many developers in Austin with this job.
Yeah, 100%. So the coolest thing I started going. So here's my strategy that I've been doing. If people are wondering, how do you get like find opportunity. So there's your route is fantastic. I started going to meetups. And so I started going to Remix meetup. And what I did is I was like, hey, that was a cool meetup. Let me start building a project. So I started building a project with Remix and sharing what I'm doing on Twitter. And then the guy who was running the meetup, he's like, Paul, like I see you working on the project, you know, we always looking for speakers. If you want, you could chat about like what you're learning. And I was like, hey, I'm a beginner. And they're like, oh, don't worry about it. There's a lot of people there, beginners, as long as you just like do something, like somebody somewhere doesn't know what that is. And so I did a bunch of talks. And the coolest thing is, like, I didn't think much of it. And then Brooks, the guy who sets it up, he called me one day. He's like, Paul, I referred you to Get Nation because they're doing a huge Remix conference and they do a bunch of other conferences throughout the year. And I thought you would be a good MC. And so now just by doing this, by getting involved, going to places, talking to people, making friends, and being involved in the community, now I have a opportunity where I am going to be one of the MCs at the Remix Conf, which is like, to me, like crazy. And so that's awesome, what I was going to tell to people. Like, there's so many different ways, like your route to go by making sure like people go the contract route where you're looking for like big companies and, you know, getting through this way, getting involved in the community like I'm doing. It's like a good way to do it. And so like what I would say is just go ahead.
Volunteering for the new recruiters at the office I mainly work with. They like, I'm like, dude, just call me and practice on me because they're all nervous and stuff. And I'm like the nicest person a recruiter could cold call. And so I meet so many recruiters that way, and they know so much about the business. I mean, they don't like understand what the technology is really, but they know like what's hot, what's happening, you know, like the really big projects. You start meeting people of like, what banks are building, what secret huge thing that's going to hire people, etc. So it's meeting people is super important, apparently, which is programmers, we don't really want to talk to other humans. So
this is like so crazy. So I'm going to share this. Like, I hate to like talk about like, cause literally just like you, I was some random dude on the like who didn't know anything about coding, and late in our lives decided to change and like get a job. So I'm going to quickly share like my other screen for like a hot second. I think it's this one. So like, check this out. This is a Remix Conf in Europe. I mean, it's going to be on the cloud. And
that's awesome, man.
Here's Paul Bruslavsky. You know, like, how do I get here?
That's awesome.
Like, and it's just don't give up. Keep going. Keep doing stuff. And more importantly, it's basically just doing what it takes. And you will get there. And like I said, the secret ingredient is not like what Luke is sharing. He's sharing steps that will help you, but that's not the secret sauce. The secret sauce is, are you going to put in the work that is required to get all those things done? I know, like, this is why, like, so like some people are going to get upset at me. Easy. I'm going to say this thing, like, I really appreciate people that work hard, and I will give my shirt off my back to help him. But if I see someone that's doing minimum amount of effort, constantly waiting for me to like hold their like hand and not trying at all, like not even going to like to Google thing or like whatever, like I don't want to associate myself with them. Like, I'm so sorry. But because I know how hard I had to work. I know, Luke, you had to work really hard. The pain and like literal depression that
and it doesn't feel real.
I went through, and like we just kept grinding, kept going. And sometimes people like, oh, this, like, you don't have to work hard. You will get it. That nobody owes you anything. You have to claw and fight every step of the way.
It's so worth it just to be in a job where like the day flies by, where you're like passionate about what you do. Where there's opportunity to make really good money. And that makes me insane when developers like complain about recruiters calling them. Like, how lucky are you that you're in a field where people go to crazy lengths to offer you a job, that you can get a really high paying job once you've been in the industry for a little bit, just by like answering the phone. That is such a crazy, insane thing that our grandparents would have never believed, you know? And like the lack of gratitude for that world because of just computers doing everything. And now we're in this crazy opportunity is really disgusting to me. Dude, this week, 2 Amazon recruiters contacted my wife trying to get in touch with me.
Wow, they're really
jobs,
desperate.
even though they're like doing hire freezes. I could never in a million, billion, trillion years pass an Amazon interview. But
they sometimes do that with, because I know some people that got hired at Amazon. I'm like, come on, How?
Really?
I'm like, yeah. So I'm kind of suspect.
Must be
They must
miserable
have some.
there.
They must have. Yeah, I hear they work a lot, like crazy.
Yeah.
I was gonna say like Big B has like a really cool quote to say like if in terms of making sure you're putting the effort, especially when coding, saying
Right.
stay focused the longest. I like to show 3 solutions I try to find before asking a question, asking for help. Yeah, 100%. No developer
cool,
that you're working with wants to have you come up to them and be like, hey, how you do this? What they want to hear is you come up and tell them, hey, this is what I think the problem is. Here's the like things that I looked up and tried. I think I'm getting closer.
Right.
Is there something I'm missing based on the things I showed you? Like you need to set that context and you have to show them that you literally tried.
You work
Yeah.
remote though, Paul. Like, how do you prove that to the people on your team when you're new? This is something I think about all the time. Because if it's remote, it's pretty hard to be like, there's really no way to show that you're trying hard. Like if you're on Teams all the time.
Yeah,
so
this is like really
Netflix,
tricky
moving the
thing.
mouse around.
Mark had like a really good thing. He said, if you're working like Dev Mental Life here, he said like if you're working online, you better document everything. And that's why we use Notion. And this is something that I really, really didn't do well, and I'm still learning. But the thing that saves my ass, like, because you get to come up with initiatives, and I have been delivering on very hard topics, and so they're like, they see my value. And what's been happening, like my biggest thing that somebody told me is like, Paul, you need to document your stuff more and more and more, so you could talk about like what you're doing. But what saved me is that everybody who I worked with or on my team, my things that I did impacted them. So they actually talked about me to the CEO or to my manager.
Oh, wow.
And so like,
that's amazing.
That like worked out for me. And so, but yeah, it's like, you really, really have to deliver and meet your goals. And so in my job, what we do, when every 3 months we have like 2 or 3 initiatives that you're responsible for. You plan your initiative and then you create like tasks, and then you stay accountable to those tasks, and you meet with your managers to tell them, are you like on progress? Do you have any blockers? And all of that gets written down weekly. So there's always that history. And so like the issue would be if someone decided to not write the weekly report, that it doesn't take much time, but basically that's the way for them to check you. And also like the initiatives that I do, like, they like there's a final product. Like for instance, one of my initiatives last quarter was to improve our migration process. And one of the things, we have the software called Code Mods that needed to be fixed. And so I first discovered that it was broken. I found the bugs, and I talked to a bunch of engineers to help me how to fix it. And then we fixed it. And so that was like a fixed product that I was able to show at the end. And so it's like very easy to see like what I've done, but definitely write everything down like on a weekly basis for sure.
That is a good idea. I'm always like thinking of ideas like that because I worry remote, because I think it's the remote thing with the Scrum scam like combined.
Yeah, I'm assuming like if you're doing like PR, if you're pushing code and you like pull requests and people looking at them.
But if it's just like finding just the number of pull requests, and I think when you're in a remote team, like the new people are all like trying to prove themselves and do as many pull requests as quickly as possible, which isn't necessarily the best thing, because they're just kind of like going too fast, low quantity. Like a really good company, they have the resources to make sure like we're going to do an intense code review, make sure you're doing things right, test stuff like that. So it's like a difficult balance, because I think with remote too, that managers are like, oh, we can push people more because no one's going to see them sleeping under the desk or whatever. Like we can go on and on about work-life balance, but then we can say, here's Scrum tasks, and like either this is the easiest job in the world this 2 weeks, or it's complete hell.
No, I'm so blessed in the regard that I work for a French company. They have total different view on this work-life balance. And so I almost did not get hired because when they asked me what my hobby was, I said I do coding for fun. And for them, they almost took it as like, I have no life and I don't know how to work balance. And that's a big concern for them, which is not true. Like I do a lot of fun stuff, but like my company where I work, it's like they're the opposite. They're like, you need to take care of your like mental health. You have to take care of yourself, because if you're happy, you'll be more productive. You know what I mean? That's their
absolutely true attitude.
Yeah. And so like this idea, having employees, burn the candle on both sides. It's kind of
Right.
crazy. Like
leads to
if I worked
disaster.
for that type of company, I would be trying to get out like as quickly as possible. And for me, like this idea of like you need to work more than you're required. Like I think if you have a job, like I heard this quote from like this young kid, 20 years old. I was so mad because I'm like, how's he so smart at 20? I was such an idiot. But he said, like, and this quote comes from somebody else. He didn't make it. It comes from this guy, Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn. He says, work on your job, like work on yourself more than you do on the job. So the idea is like when you're at your job, you work your 40 hours, but then after you're done, you work on skill development to help you get that better job. Don't try to give up like your life towards the company that sometimes maybe they'll take care of you and sometimes maybe they won't, you know what I mean? And so I'm a big believer in,
because I thought you would like get all your skills from your job, like nothing will compare to on the job training. And that's kind of true. But at the same time, to get to the next level, you really need to be like, okay, I'm studying the really relevant skills that are not really necessarily the thing I do every day.
Yeah. And also like depends what your, what your goal is. Like for instance, like the thing that I'm doing, like I want to work for a company, like maybe until like I'm 50, because I'm like getting close to it, whatever. But so depressing, but not that close. But what I'm trying to do part-time by 50, it's like, can I have a SaaS product, or can I have some sort of business around development, or can I do something that I could do on my own time? And so that's like kind of my thing. Like I'm going to try to see if I could learn it. And also because it's fun. And here's the cool thing, about that process, regardless if it fails or not, I am learning new skills that help me become a better developer. Right.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's the thing, like companies that push people really hard, that it's not just, okay, wait, I'm working like 12 hours, but getting paid for 8 or something, like I don't have any work-life balance. Is that you're actually, in 5 years, no one is going to remember that you worked 60 hours a week. But if you took that 60 hours, gave 40 or 35 to the company, and then you had 20 hours to work on like your programming blog or learning really relevant skills or making a course,
you grow faster.
Just to increase your status in the industry, even if no one uses it or watches it, because you're not just doing like, okay, my job is I'm debugging these old web form stuff, but here I'm learning like really the most in-demand things or whatever. That's a huge difference to your career as opposed to 40 to 60 hours on the job. So if someone's 100%. Asking you to work more than, I think it's really like, even if you're doing more than like 45 hours a week, that's going to seriously impact your ability to have time to study.
100%.
If you're like really into coding or passionate about it, which I think we appreciate as career changers, or coding after 30. Because like in my job where they're very coding after 30 based, everyone is so much more passionate. And the first job like had connections to like computer science, and everyone like went to fancy schools and everything. But every coder I met, they were like, "Oh, my parents made me. Like I hate coding. I hate this job." It's just like my parents said, "Oh,
that is
you have to learn to code, be a programmer." Because finally, like programming, like it's like sort of at that dentist level of status where parents now, for the first time, are like, "Oh, you need to become a programmer," which I feel like in the 80s or 90s did not really happen, but post.com maybe, or people under 30 now are in the first generation where their parents were like pushing them, forcing them to be computer programmers, which is really bizarre to me.
What's crazy, all the new kids are going to be streamers. Like nobody's going to have a real job. So
everyone's just going to be streaming to everyone else.
Musk better figure out how to mass produce his droids that he's building, cyborgs, to do all the meaningless jobs, because there's everybody's going to be a
streaming paradise.
But what I was going to say, about like, programming, work on developing your skill, keep going, moving forward. Don't give your world for the job. Like do like I give my best when I'm at work. Like, you know what I mean? Like I do I do work more hours because I have fun. But then like when I'm done, and I'm like, I need to make time for my family, like my personal projects, whatever. It's all.
Do you work like 9 to 5 there, or do they give you flexible time? How does that work?
Yeah, very flexible times. But normally I work like about 8.5, 9 hours. Like
dude,
I'm including lunch in there. I'm including lunch in there. Yeah.
Right.
So
that's cool. That's really cool. but it's kind of weirdly hard to program during the day because I was always studying programming at night.
Yeah.
And now, like when you actually have a programming job, like people are like interrupting you constantly, asking you stuff during the day. So I'm almost wondering, like, if you're in a job where you could maybe do like some of your studying stuff during the day, and then just that time, like 8 to 10 p.m., like no one's on Teams, and you can just code. And what's beautiful about my job now is they shut off the database at 10, so people won't do any kind of crazy workworkaholic stuff. And like the weekends, like you can't log on at all. It's all like locked down, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like at my company, I like once was like, oh, let me do this on the weekend, and my manager was like, no, like you're gonna do it on Monday. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna do it on Monday.
Right.
Like
that is a really good sign of a company. My boss did the same thing.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Yeah,
but you gotta go descend into hell, learn to code, get there, just keep going. That's the most important.
Literally, it's like that
Take
story.
The first job, hang on for dear life, and then there's a wonderful job at the other end.
What was that story? The guy travels through 9 rings of hell, or 7. I don't forget what it was. It was like, you know that story, right? That's what the hell was it called? If anybody knows in the chat, where it's basically a story of someone like going through different.
Inferno?
Yeah, exactly. That's basically what you're doing when you first get your you going through that Dante Inferno like learning journey, going from one circle to another, developing the skill. But eventually, you're just gonna arrive there. Like one thing, like people say, like, would I ever do things differently, even though like I messed up so many like times and I could have been a developer sooner? And I'm like, I mean, I wish I would have been like much smarter in terms of making better life decisions, but that's neither here or there. But I would never regret deciding to change in code. And here's the point I wanted to make. I forgot about it. So you talked about like some of the other developers who've been coding since 5, some of them like been in the industry already 15, 20 years. They're almost like they're fed up. They don't want to do it anymore. They're like, not all of them, but they're like burnt out. They're like, just like, I wish I could do something else. Like, and you know, they don't, for me, starting late, like everything is exciting. You know what I mean? I'm excited about everything, bro. I'm like, people like think I'm mentally ill because like, how are you so excited about coding? I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, isn't this fun? People like, hey, what do you like? And then I ask them like a question about programming. They're like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, no, this is awesome. I want to know this. Like, what are you talking about?
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, I can't believe I'm getting paid to do this. And I've never, ever felt close to that with any kind of job or business before. And what's crazy is like, I keep thinking now, like this, going through this is what I need to have this passion for programming. What if I didn't fail that Java class? Like, what if I took the Java class and I like set aside enough time to pass? And I was like, okay, Java. And I'm like, wait, I got to get a job now. I just graduated college. Okay, I'll just get a Java job, like every Java programmer. And then that would be my job. And maybe I try other things. Like I would not have a passion for it. But because I went through like so much failure and then failing, then finally like finding something I appreciate, and also being totally unable to learn to code until I like became obsessed with Super Memo, and finding like a weird way to learn, then getting good enough to get a job. And like that is it's an incredibly meaningful journey when you go that way. And it just like gives you such a more profound sense of peace than if you're just like, my parents made me become a Java programmer.
And what's cool about it is like I feel like it's like you're literally developing a superpower, because once you have it, if you don't keep up with it, you'll become irrelevant. But it's like once you have it, you understand it, and you continue to grow, you're always gonna be like in demand somewhere. You know what I mean? And to me, it's amazing. And it's literally like coding knowledge is like there was an interesting story. It's like this businessman, he came from Taiwan or like whatever to America. And he came at the airport and they go to him like, do you have anything to declare? And he's like, no, I have nothing to declare, except he had this idea to start a software company that made him a billionaire. And I was like, that's insane, where you literally have a mental skill that you could make money and, you know, scale it to whatever like you desire, especially if you create your own product.
It really is a superpower. And it's magic.
Insane.
It's not like magic, it is magic. Like, is this real? Like, you're just typing things and you know, billions of dollars move around, or you're building this like huge, especially in enterprise, really big projects or whatever, or a website. I mean, it's just so obviously like we're on other sides of the country and talking. That's so incredible. And that you can just do that with typing is weird. It's like we're all in this weird race to like type on keys in the exact correct combination. And then if you type the right key combination, money comes out, you get job status.
Exactly,
It's really
in the
bizarre.
right order. And
Yeah.
let me just like, we gotta squash this myth.
Okay.
Realistically, and we could talk about your effort.
Okay.
What do you think is a realistic timeline for someone to be like, and I know it could be different, but we'll just do in general, for someone to get a job as a developer?
Dude,
Like
I think you should give yourself 2 years self-taught.
Yeah. It took me
If you're
about
not taking
3.5
2 years.
years. It took me, because I'm a very slow learner. It took me 3.5 years
Okay.
to get there. But 2
Yeah,
years,
I
I
think
agree with that. 2 years is like a really good.
Because I think also,
can
like,
you-
if you're focused, that is also with 2 years, because you don't want to jump from different things as you so skillfully point out in your videos. Like, if you're doing what I wish I'd done if I did it over again, by like doing SQL, like I think that you can do in 6 months and get good, and then you've like got that sense of accomplishment. You can start networking, whatever.
Then you do
And
the
then
SP,
to do
C#
Angular and C#, just be like over the next year. One thing I really wish I had done in terms of projects, like I wish I had only built a bug tracker for a year
It makes
as I was going.
so much sense. A lot of people like I had this guy on. God bless his soul. I love Jack Harrington, but he's like, no, build something fun. Be like, and you can't.
Oh yeah, that guy's brilliant.
But what, like, you could build something fun that you might miss out learning about how implementing some of the things that are very common in your, like, so this is why I love the bug tracker, like Coding Foundry recommends. Everything that you need to be able to do to build a functional bug tracker, that means you'll be able to do your goddamn job when you get hired. You know what I mean? Because the skills that you learn from auth, from like, getting data, writing data to the database.
They're totally right too. That I think actually a better advice than what they give is to clone Jira. That demonic software. It's just get a free trial for Jira, or see videos of like how real project managers use that horrible thing, and then you want to clone that, because it's very likely that the person who is going to give you that first job or first contract is they're playing Jira Tetris, and that's like their whole world. So if they see that, that's going to make a huge difference. And if you build that in Angular with .NET background and backend, it's going to be incredible. And I think that's like what I'm going to focus on, because I believe after your first job, this really drives me crazy, because I really think after the first job, your portfolio does not really matter that much. I think it's the experience really matters. And
100%.
so this is just for getting that first job. If you can build something as close to a Jira clone, and then you'll see how long it takes to build anything. I mean, like 4 programmers working full time, especially when it's like a really big system, it's like so slow to move the needle on something changing. So you'll think like, oh, I could do this in a weekend. Then you realize like, whoa, this is actually way bigger than you think. So that gives it a nice tight thing for your project to chip away at, And if I was doing this, like doing something totally non-technical during the day, I'd just try to get 2 really focused hours in for studying every day. And then on the weekend, I think if you have one day, which is like simulates that 10 hours at the office where like you're chasing one single bug, you're like, I'm not getting up until I find the problem and fix this. If you can simulate that like once a week, and then every other day do like 2 solid hours, you'll absolutely get there.
100%. Someone was asking, what tech stack are you using at work currently?
So there's a lot of legacy stuff, but it's SQL Server running on Azure. It's like a 2016, 2016, I think we're still on. And then there's one big part of an app. I mean, it's huge. We're like all things hospitals. So like we work on a part of the plumbing that then we hand off to another team. And I work on stuff that nurses directly use. But there's like a team somewhere distant that's like a Fitbit thing, and there's so much stuff. But anyway, the tech stack is there's .NET Standard 4.8, and then we're rebuilding the app slowly in .NET. They're actually on .NET Core 3.0, which is a problem because it's out of support. So we're upgrading next week, hopefully, to .NET 6 and then Angular 14. So it was Angular 12 when I got there, but now we're on the latest stuff. So the idea is some of this legacy app has code written from 1999, maybe some from 1998. So that is integrated with the .NET 4.8 app. And then we're trying to like make this more modern thing kind of take over more and more. So one cool thing is when there's like these controls that completely got destroyed and don't work. since the upgrade to Edge.
Yep.
You know, instead of Internet Explorer being on Windows, and this was like a whole problem. So we're starting to build like a web API instead of these like crazy old web forms where there's like SQL in the view and then it gets all rendered together. That's slowly being replaced. So we've got a pretty cool mix of technology, but there is so much legacy stuff out there. And for your first job, like you just want to get experience. For that first job, no one's really gonna care.
Yeah, 100%.
I think too much. Like it's just the experience that matters more. So if it's like C# doing something legacy, it's not a super big deal. Like when you get past 6 months or a year, that can start to impact your career. And I think another thing to keep in mind is like I think there's this like 2 to 5 year window as I meet people at more companies. Like if you go to like a big bank as a full-time employee, you're kind of considered a junior until you get to 2 years. Like I think in contracting, if you swap contracts every 6 months, you can start making like real money after your first year, and you're going to get way better. And then like once you've even done one contract, a lot of people at companies who've been there for so long, they're like, what's it like at other companies? How do they do things? You know, you kind of have this like badass experience. So it's a good way to level up. And then when you're 2 to 5 years, a company that's not like Amazon, it's not going to be like a super crazy leak code thing, but they are going to expect some data structures and algorithms. And you start to get those jobs where it's like, here's a bunch of money to move. You know, here's like a sign-on bonus. Here's like a really good salary. Here's some stock options. But you're not expected to be like an architect where you get like big system design questions. Because once you're after like 5 years, this is what people tell me, the expectations kind of change and the interviews become really crazy again because they're like, okay, you're coming in as a senior and we want you to know system design and all these things.
And at
so
that
it's an interesting sweet spot.
I was going to say, at that point, you have two paths. You're either going to go deeper into that architectural or you're going to go into management. It's like one of those two options. Yeah.
Right.
So it depends like how much you really love coding or like, you know, so.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Because I
have a friend who broke in through, he went back to borrowed money to go to college and did Java. He went like later in life or whatever, early middle age, not later in life. And then he broke in through tech systems doing, it was supposed to be Java, but he ended up doing Groovy, like way before Kotlin, like this old JVM language. I think Netflix used to use it. It's really wacky. So he was doing that. He moved his wife and him like across the country to take this job. This is before remote was a big thing. And then he started doing a lot of contracts, and then he got hired by, I think, Bank of America to manage all their contracts for a while. So he managed tons of contracting projects, and then used that to get like a much better job.
Yeah, I was actually going to quickly say, if anybody's jumping on late, definitely check out the beginning of the stream. So much value talking about ways to get hired, going the contract route, and not contract where you go on Upwork. No, this is with huge contracting agencies that contract to companies like Microsoft, you know, IBM, like big companies, and why it's a easier or better way if you're just starting out.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you mentioned Microsoft because that's like a weird hire. I'm trying to meet more Microsoft contractors because they do a really weird thing where they go for 1.5 years and then it's 6 month cool down period. Yeah. So they'll make like big money, like it's a way to make like 400 grand and then travel for 6 months.
That's crazy.
And so there's actually full-time employees, even though they pay them pretty well, where they want to become contractors. And people I've known who work there, like the full-time employees are like, maybe we'll code this week, maybe we'll make a drum circle, maybe we'll like wander through the woods. It's like very relaxed. And then the contractors are pretty head down, but they're still like respected. And if they hate you, they won't like fire you. They'll just kind of like rubber room you until the contract runs out. But one of their contracting firms has contacted me, but it's weird that Tech Systems doesn't have them as a client. So they'll like go out, find firms. They'll be like, here's a bunch of money and a week off and vacation. You get bank holidays and like, do you want to do it? So it's fun because it's like this not very talked about world, and you kind of have to like search around and be a private detective and meet people and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, man. I'm so happy for you. I am so like just meeting you when you didn't have a job, like the things you're going through, like hearing your story and be like, man, you've been through a lot of hard times, and then to see you get your first job, and it's not what you wanted, like, but like, you know, it was still like a good learning experience. And now seeing you like continue to grow, and now getting your second like job and loving it is just so like amazing to see. And like, it's so great, and I like literally
Thank you
feel
so
like
much, Paul. That's so
the
sweet of you.
happiness, you know, like I would say like proud, but like I'm not your dad, but like in a sense, but I don't know any other word to say. It's like this is so amazing. I
Thank
think
you
like
so much.
all you need to do is like put a lot of work. Like I mean, I'm
Yeah,
not gonna beat around the bush.
definitely
Like
keep going.
yeah, you got to
And
put
I
in
made
work, keep going, and
it
that's
is so worth it. Even my
the
level,
thing.
it's like
Yeah.
it's so worth it. Like if you're struggling now, no one listening to this could have felt stupider than I have, and still do when trying to
Yeah.
learn. But find a way that works for you. Check out Super Memo Assistant, Google it, and then you can read nerdy programming books.
Yep.
I'm in the videos for it, and it's super fun way to learn. And find a way that works for you, you know, and then like break in, and it's definitely worth it.
100% worth it. And I know we're like about to hit 2 hours, so I'm be mindful of your
Yeah, I'm
time.
so
And
sorry to keep you for so
like,
long,
no,
man.
no, no. I could talk for you for like another 6. We'll definitely have to have you back on. And I love the
Yeah,
fact that we both have 2 different paths of how we got here.
right,
And it's perfectly fine. Like people have to stop
right,
hating on like, oh, just because you like this framework or I like this language or oh, he's
right,
ASP.NET and I'm like all about React and JavaScript. It's fine.
right.
Like there's multiple paths. You just have to pick one and keep moving. Yeah. And before we go, somebody's asking, what is that super memo? I liked Anki before, but you told me about super memo.
Oh yeah, so that's
So can
like the
you give
really
people like
nerdy one.
quick introduction? Yeah, to what it is
Yeah, so it's
before
by
we
this
go.
really eccentric Polish guy. He started in 1989. Anki is like ripped off from SuperMemo, first algorithm. I use both of them, but the cool thing about SuperMemo has this thing called incremental reading, where you make highlights and then you shuffle those highlights, and make highlights of those highlights, and that sounds crazy and stupid, but it's actually really incredible. So there's kind of a learning curve. There's like a very small community of people who are into it, but how I got interested in development is someone I met. He was making a plugin for it where you could actually read whole books this way. He was a C# developer,
That's
and that is an open source project in C#. So it's somewhat abandoned. So if anyone wants to practice getting experience on a real C# project, it's a cool thing. So that's how I learned programming, is by reading books with this wacky SuperMemo plugin. So it's a really, really fun way to read. And then you sort of take little snippets. I'm really into this thing called Zettelkasten. There's a book called How to Take Smart Notes, and Obsidian, Rome, Research are kind of based on that. So I take like, you build your projects, do your normal coding thing, but the little really special stuff, take it out of your SuperMemo snippets, put in Obsidian. I've got like tons of tags. You link things together. And then I also go through a book literally, and I make recipes in Obsidian. And then, so like I have so many notes now at work when someone's like, make a new blah, blah, blah. It's
You're
like,
I
boom.
got
I have,
this.
and the way I
got
do,
this
I think of
reference.
everything as understanding and recipes. I think on the Lex Friedman podcast, there's the guy who made the x86 assembly language standard.
Yep.
And I stole that from him. And I think it's so brilliant because most programming stuff, it's like we're really cooked. So don't freak out if you don't remember stuff. Like I'm like, oh my God, how do I make a new Angular app or whatever? E-commerce site, you just be like looking at the recipes because we're doing research and we're finding the different recipes, linking them together. But if you go to the trouble of really writing down for you, how does it work? How did you get the code in the book to actually work on your machine?
Right.
And I always I like put crazy arrows everywhere and stuff. So it's like, okay, could my mom follow this recipe who knows nothing about computers and still get it to work? That's one extreme of how I like to learn. And then I do use, like when I go to the gym, do some Anki reviews. And
Yeah.
you slowly start breaking down just the really, really high priority knowledge, like that 0.1% of the most important stuff to learn, and just grill that. And then a bunch of stuff, and it's really fun.
You know what I
So
used to use
that's
Anki
my
for
super
is
nerd
so
thing.
so crazy because I used to be involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu like at a high
Okay.
level, and I used to teach it as
Ah,
like a black belt, and so to learn new stuff, I would literally do
okay.
Anki repetitions, and
Really?
then
That's
when I would
fascinating.
spar, I would literally see those images in my brain, and I'm like, oh, this is where my hand should go. It like
That's
blew my mind,
incredible.
and then
Wow.
so like
Dude, I
and
love that story. I love stuff like that.
even
That's
now, like
incredible.
I
Did it
started going
work?
back. Yeah, very well. I started going back to jujitsu, which I took 3 years off, which was like insane
Okay.
because that's a long time to take off as like a black belt. And so I'm like, how
Yeah.
am I gonna be relevant? How am I? There's this. I'm nerding out of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. The top jiu-jitsu player right now is Gordon Ryan. He's like the best.
Okay.
And his teacher, Danaher, he's like also the best. They used to be in the city, so I used to actually go there to the school, but now they're like local to Texas, which blew my mind too. But I literally took his instructional and I broke it down into like
That's
little
awesome.
Anki things, and then I just watched it based on the review. And then in class, the one thing I don't have to think, it's like, how do you do the move? You know, I know it from that mental repetition. So instead, I just have to focus on timing. You know, and so I've been like catching up to people and learning stuff. Like, but the
because
one thing
the thing that you don't need to know anything is not really true. Like, it is a research job.
Yeah.
I think of it like it's like being a
you
historian.
Do a lot of research.
You know, like you want, hire a historian who you're like, okay, you're going to be a professor on the Roman Empire, and like every year you're going to write like a really cool new book. So you've got, when you're writing that book, I mean, they got notes everywhere. They're looking through stuff. Like, it's all about working with reference material.
Yeah.
But if you had lunch with them and they didn't know anything, they were like, Rome, what is that? What is Italy? Is that a place? Like, they didn't know anything, then there's no jumping out off points. And like, you could get incredibly confused in code if you really don't know anything. So when people are like, you don't need to know anything because all you do is Google, it's like, like all we do is go into Stack Overflow, but it's still freaking hard, you know? And like, you're still given problems like, we have no idea why this isn't working. And no one's going to know until you start doing the research. But you're jumping off points of research, you do have to know stuff. And it's cool to have a method that's fun for you to be getting good reference material, as opposed to a lot of people I see, they're like very at a surface level when they're coding, and it's hard to kind of find the really hard problems and stuff.
Yeah. Does SuperMemo have like an iOS app? I didn't get that far.
No. They had a really crappy one, but it was written in Delphi, the current version. He hasn't made a new version in a while. It's very difficult to use, really buggy, only works on Windows. So I don't remember. I think the last update was 4 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So in theory, like, I wanted to like get into Rust and, make like, improve SuperMemo, get in there because there's so many incredibly annoying things. But it is still super cool. Yeah. I read a book. Like, dude, I was flying from Albuquerque, New Mexico to New York City in like 2009, 10, and there was a Wired. I think that might be the wrong year. 2000. Anyway, and called "Want to Remember Everything You'll Ever Learn? Surrender to This Algorithm," which is about SuperMemo and what an eccentric guy, the guy who created it, is. And I was like, wow, that just happened to be like in the plane seat with me. And like reading that article completely changed my life because I could never learn anything. And I was the worst student ever. And I like kind of, flirted with it a little bit. I wanted to become like a financial analyst or something. So I used it to study for the CFA exam, but I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I completely bombed it. This was like one of my earlier career ideas. But just because I had this QA testing job and like the tests, it was just a really weird job and the tests were crazy hard, even though it was a very low status job, then I'm like, okay, I got to learn how to learn, to be able to keep this job. So that's how I got into, obsessively researching, like, how does an idiot like me, who can't learn anything, find a way to learn? And then people are like, oh, you're so smart, you learn coding. Like, you have no idea how freaking hard it was to learn anything.
Yeah.
I remember like begging people who are C# developers, like, explain generics to me. Like, what is a generic? What are the angles? Like, what does that mean? What are types? Like, I just don't get it. It's impossible. What is an interface?
I think that's normal.
But if you break it down, if you think about it,
unless
like
you just learn JavaScript, then you have none of those things.
That's true. That's true. That's fair.
I'm kidding. That's a joke. That's a joke. That's a joke. I'm just kidding.
Totally. But it's crazy but it's really, you just got to think, okay, there's actually, you can't really know how many things there are to learn, but there's like a bunch of stuff to learn. Think of it. What is like that knowledge atomically? What is the simplest way to express something, like yes or no? And then you start thinking in items like that. Like, I used to tutor these kids who were trying to become doctors when I was getting into this stuff. And we just like break it down. And if you break it down enough, it's really, you start thinking like, okay, becoming a doctor is like 50,000 Anki cards or something.
Right.
If it's really, and programming, everything is basically exactly the same in terms of learning. There's this physicist, Ernest Rutherford, who said, physics is the only real discipline. Everything else is just variations on stamp collecting. That is totally true.
Wow.
So, dude,
Yeah, no, it's awesome, man.
I'm sorry, I'm like rambling like a
no, no.
madman.
I could talk. I could
took so
talk
much of your time.
to you for. No, this is great for me too. I love it. It's fun. Definitely should have you on more often. Definitely a lot of fun.
Cool, man.
Yeah. So,
Dude, peeps, learn SQL for 6 months. Get a
Yeah.
SQL cert.
Yeah.
Start blogging about what you're learning with some recipes.
Yeah.
You know, put them on a crappy blog. The stuff that you're learning, make like a 4-hour video course on SQL. Then do an assessment test, like on BrainBench, like a really crappy one. Start networking with recruiters and be like, just let me take your test. Let me take your test. Let me take your test. Someone will let you. You'll get an awesome score. People will be like, whoa, this guy, where did he come from? Then you can start meeting, networking with people. Start building a Jira clone in .NET and Angular over a year.
ASP.
Make your own .NET Angular course. I'm going to do one. Just put it on YouTube. Maybe one person will watch it, maybe 0 people. But the person hiring you is going to like scan through it and see your face as you're coding. If you're doing this like wacky learning way, you've got all these recipes and stuff, and just put them on your crappy blog, crappy video course, crappy blog. You're good at taking these tests. They're not leak code. You don't have to do that at all. You know, go in through tech systems. You'll like suddenly work for companies you could never get into otherwise. And then that's on your resume. And then when the year of doing that, you'll start making actual money. A year after that, then you could get a really, really good job where people will pay you to move and all that crap. And just do a little leak code if you want, or go in whatever a million directions. But I think that's that's how I would break in if I did it over again.
Yeah. So what I was going to say, like, this is a really good strategy. I love the fact that you're going for big contract companies that will place you in the big ass companies, you know, out there.
Man, it's easier to work for a big company than like a bunch of pizza places or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. And the one thing that I was going to say,
that's not going to transfer as well.
The one thing I was going to say, we're so different in terms of what we did to break into the field that like literally what you said and what I say will be almost like to some people it might be different, but the commonalities are be focused, have a goal, know what you have to do to get the job that you want, and then execute every day regardless how you feel. Because like we never met in person, but we've talked before, and like I know you had rough time in your life. You know, everybody has rough times in their life. It's not a there's always someone whose life is even worse than yours, and so you're not special in that regard. So all you have to do is just show up every day, do the work, and understand that learning to code is hard. It's not like how these YouTube channels romanticize. So once you get that out of your head and have realistic expectations, like might take me 2 years. It took me 3.5 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it took you 2 years. Like it's, and so like it,
but you can catch up and pass people.
Yes.
It's totally
100%.
doable.
Yeah. 100%.
Become valuable, and like people are going to, it's very fulfilling thing to do. But like, it's so incredibly frustrating that the most important thing I think is to just keep going.
Yeah.
And it's so critical. I mean, that's when things open up. Once it's like, okay, this person is not going to stop, then just magically things will start to crack open.
Yeah,
I think,
and that is the secret. And somebody like knew that this year for me like was really horrible. That's why I took time off YouTube, like just because I wanted to like focus on my job or just not get even more depressed. And so like honestly, like for me, it's like I feel the pain that people say that, you know, sometimes like you live in a country where you have 0 opportunities. That's completely shitty. But like if you live in the state where you're just lucky to have this opportunity, there's like literally nothing that could stop you, because some people in other countries have it way harder. You know what I mean? And they still don't make excuses. They literally just do the thing that they need to do, like to get, you know, the job. To get
what's crazy too is like a lot of people you meet in the US are like, oh, I'm 24. Can I learn React at 24?
God damn.
Are you crazy? You know?
I'm gonna punch someone.
You're like a fetus.
So yeah, here's my new idea for a service I want to start. It's for like when people have smart comments. I want to make a thing called like Slapogram. So it's very similar, like you know, Will Smith and Chris Rockinson. Like, if I'm not saying that was the improper use of Slapogram, but we're gonna do it properly. It's when someone has something stupid to say, you'll be able to dial this number and order Slapogram anywhere in the world. Not like anything hurtful, but enough to be like, hey, just stop talking silly nonsense and go back to work. You know what I mean? So, but that was my idea for a business. We'll see how it goes. You know,
dude. Thank you so much for having me.
No, always awesome.
6 hours to take my kid to the park.
Oh, there you go. 6 hours. Jesus. What time you wake up?
Saturday mornings I take him, and he wakes up like 6:30.
Yeah, this young kids, man.
How old is your child? Your daughter is 20, in her 20s?
23.
That's awesome,
She
man.
no longer a child. She's in the Navy. Like she's awesome. She's got more tattoos
awesome,
now
man.
than I do, which is fantastic.
Oh, wow.
She's cool. The best kid ever.
Dude, you must be so
from
happy.
everything
That's so
we've
crazy.
been through.
Like,
Like, you know, she turned out so good. Yeah, no, I'm super happy, super ecstatic. And the way if people see cats in the background, sometimes that's her cats because she went because she's serving in the Navy, and so she couldn't take the cats to Japan overseas. And so like I have them now. So they're one day I have to give them back, which I don't know how that's gonna go, but yeah.
Okay.
So
okay, very cool, man.
Yeah, pretty good.
Dude, thank you so much for having me.
No, thank you, Luke.
I didn't bore people too much.
No, not at all. I think this was like the
Keep
most
going,
popular
Pete.
stream I had, to be honest. We got good views.
Really?
It was great. Yeah. I mean, so here's the thing. People want to see real people talk about real shit. Like, and to me, like, I'm like, you can't get any realer than this. Like, because
Dude, I'm
nobody like wants to hear a story of someone who's like already making bajillion money and like they're selling courses on YouTube and they're telling how easy things are. They want to think about what's the truth? It's hard. Really, like you're in the trenches. You're doing the thing. Like everybody here in the chat, you are going through the process. You don't know, like there's none of this like, you know, you'll just get something because someone's going to give it to you. You got to work for it. And coding is really, really hard. And the more people understand that sooner, the faster they're going to make progress. You know, that's it. Yeah, dude, that's yeah, man. Yeah, Engine Boy, he always it's 9:46 a.m. in India. Jesus Christ, that's crazy.
Oh wow, okay. Yeah, good morning.
Yeah,
wow, look at all these comments. I didn't even look at these.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Holy
shit. A lot of love. But yeah, man,
good.
Thank you so much. Thank you all in the comments.
Yeah.
If you want to see more Luke, I'll definitely invite him some more. Always awesome. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, you don't have to. If you don't smash the like button, don't smash it for me or Luke. Smash it for all the wonderful people in the chat giving the love and everything like that. But with that being said, thank you, Luke. Thank you, everybody. I'll see everybody our next stream, which I'll probably do a stream tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. U.S. Central Time. I don't even know the topic yet, but it's fine. You know, we'll get there. But Luke, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you. And yeah, if you're not sure where to find me, I'm that dude, Coding After 30. You could go check out the channel. I just want to show you this amazing animation that I have. It's actually not that amazing, but I'm like obsessed with 80s stuff. But I stream 9 a.m. U.S. Central Time on Fridays and Saturdays, 11 a.m. So I'll be back here tomorrow. Maybe do like an open format. I'll figure out a topic later. But thank you, and I'll see all of you next time. And remember, you're the best. I love all of you so much. I hope you have an amazing rest of your weekend. Without you, this community would not exist. I am part of your community. I can't say that enough. So thank you so much for everything. It was so great to see all the beautiful people stopping by. Big B420, like great to see you. You've been watching my streams before like I even knew what the hell I was doing. Engine Boy's here. Jose's here. Ben. Code with Phono is here. Pablo Zuda was asking where I'm from. I'm like originally from Russia, but my mom was born in Ukraine, so I have family in both. But I guess it's not popular to say that I'm Russian anymore. All the beautiful people that jumped in for the first time, thank you. And man, great. Everybody have a great one. I'll see everybody later. Take care. Bye-bye.